भूतले श्रीमते भक्तिवेदांत स्वामिन्निति नामिने नमस्ते सारस्वते देवे गौरवाणी प्रचारिणे निर्विशेष शून्यवादी पाश्चात्य देशतारिणे नमो महावदन्याय कृष्ण प्रेम प्रदायते कृष्णाय कृष्ण चैतन्य नामने गौरत्विषे नमः। हे कृष्ण करुणा सिंधो दीनबंधो जगत्पते गोपेश गोपिका कांत राधा कांत नमोस्तुते। तप्त कांचन गौरांगी राधे वृंदावनेश्वरी वृषभानुसुते देवी प्रणमामि हरिप्रिये। वाञ्छाकल्पतरुभ्यश्च कृपा सिन्धुभ्य एव च पतितानां पावनेभ्यो वैष्णवेभ्यो नमो नमः। जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासादि गौरभक्तवृंद। हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम 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 हरे हरे। हरे कृष्णा। Okay, is it clearly audible?
Yes, Guruji.
Okay. Okay, fine. So let us briefly revise a few points from yesterday. So we began yesterday with discussion on Prithu Maharaj's prayers to Lord Vishnu. So somebody would like to give a few important points from Prithu Maharaj's prayers.
Hare Krishna.
Hare.
So in one of the prayer, Prithu Maharaj was saying that he wanted to have so many millions of years to hear the glories of Supreme Lord by the association of pure devotees.
Okay, yes, that was the benediction he was requesting the Lord to give, millions of years, because he wanted to not miss anything. So much glorification of the Lord by so many devotees and so many universes. He doesn't want to miss anything. That's why he wants millions of years. Okay, fine, good. Some other points.
Kantoji, another prayer was that that he says that the benedictions which you are offering in form of flowery language of the Vedas is very much bewildering to me. So better you don't ask me what do I want, but just like a father knows what is better for son, likewise you give me whatever you feel I need. And then he's telling that that give me the service at your lotus feet, and then goddess of fortune should not feel bad about it.
Okay,
And
fine.
I hope you will take my
okay.
favor.
Okay, fine. So that was the last prayer that he's requesting the Lord to offer benediction, whatever he thinks, like a father to a son. Okay, good. Some other points.
Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna.
Go ahead.
Hare Krishna.
So in the section where he prays to Vishnu, Lord Vishnu, that basically when there is competition for serving his lotus feet, so you will favor me because you are Deen Vatsala and I am a Deen.
Right. So he's expecting that the Lord will support him because he's Deen Vatsala. Okay, good point. Yes. I think so. Narasimha Prabhu, you had your hand up.
Yeah, another benediction he's asking is to hear the glorification of the Lord from the mouth of pure devotees, and that is compared to the what is particles? The
saffron dust.
Saffron, yeah. And therefore, the personal application is, sometimes you said, we have to hear from Srila Prabhupada quite often, and not that saying that, it's the same thing Prabhupada is saying. So that was an interesting point.
Yes. So the sound vibration coming from the pure devotee touches the saffron mercy particles at the lotus feet of the Supreme Lord. And so therefore that sound vibration is spiritually very potent to bring about a transformation in the heart. Yes. Okay, a few more points.
Hare Krishna.
Yes, Vanmali Madhaprabhu. Yes, Prabhu.
Yes. Yesterday we discussed on envy.
It's not very clear, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Now it is clear.
Okay, go ahead.
Yesterday we discussed on envy. Envy is a root cause of our material existence. King Indra's envy caused trouble to many people. The envy is to find out faults to others, then it is anyway in the body, or it is at body platform, and then we discuss how to control the envy. So we can control this envy, saying that everything is controlled by Lord. One has to accept as the will of Lord, and humble stand helps to control envy.
Okay, fine, good, thank you. So we discussed some points in the previous class about envy and how to control envy. Yes, Vrindan Priyamataji.
We also discussed about the cooperation between the Vaishnavas from the behavior of Indra and Prithu Maharaj.
Yes, so we discussed about cooperation between the Vaishnavas. Yes, as an important aspect. Yes, amongst Vaishnavas. Okay, good. Okay, maybe some few more points in the classroom.
Yesterday we spoke about Vidya Vinay Sampanne. In that we were talking that when one is knowledgeable, he is humble. So when one understands his insignificance, that he is an insignificant spirit soul, then that will help him to progress in his spiritual life.
Right. Okay, good point. Yes. So we saw how Prithu Maharaj, even though he received so much of opulent reception when he was entering the city, but still he maintained his humility. So one in knowledge always remains humble. Yes, Mataji, you also wanted to say something, I think.
Yesterday we discussed about transcendental competition and
Mundane competition.
mundane competition.
Yes.
Transcendental competition, Krishna is in the center and we enhance each other, and our whole focus is to go together. Whereas mundane competition is focused on ourselves, self-centered. It's like pulling each other's leg and
right.
Krishna is
Okay,
not
good. Yes, so we discussed differences between transcendental and mundane competition. Okay, good. Okay, so from the 21st chapter, a few points from the 21st chapter, Prithu Maharaj's instructions to his citizens. Somebody would like to revise a few points?
Hare Krishna. I think is that point there, eating from the sinful place. There's a long discussion about eating from non-devotees, Govindas, etc.
Right. Yes. That was that came up in Prithu Maharaj's instructions, and this was the purport to the 24th verse. Yes. Okay, yes, we had a discussion on that, different types of invitations in 3 modes, and yes, that discussion we had. Okay, so some salient features of Prithu Maharaj's instructions to his citizens.
He instructed them to follow the Varna and Ashram duties very properly. Laws of nature are very strict and very stringent and subtle. So from there, the point the subtle point had come from that prasad thing only.
Yes. Okay, so fine. So basically, Prithu Maharaj is instructing his citizens on how they should perform. First of all, of course, he tells them that he's presenting his, he's requesting them to, of course, before that, in the 22nd verse, he says that how he has been appointed by the Supreme Lord as the king to perform his duties of protecting the citizens. And then he says that if he performs his duty properly, then he will be able to achieve the desirable objective duties according to the Vedic knowledge. And then if the king performs his duties to the citizens, then he achieves his goal. But if he does not, he just collects taxes, then he has to suffer 1/6 of the impious activities of the citizens, and also the citizens take away his own pious activities. So the results of following the instructions and the results of not following the instructions, that is what, or performing duties and not performing duties, that is what he described. And so therefore he says that for the welfare of the king, you should perform your duties, because then both benefit, and the citizens also benefit, and the king also benefits. And then he's also requesting others like the saintly persons, the devatas, the forefathers, the pitris. He's asking them also to support his decision, because then everyone gets the benefit of that. And so he's requesting the citizens to perform their varnashram duties, but at the same time offering the fruits of their activities to the Supreme Lord. And then the question may be asked that, okay, but why we should offer the fruits to the Supreme Lord? And so then in verse number 27, he describes that how ultimately whatever results one gets in life, whether one is rich or poor or beautiful or ugly or whatever, these results are ultimately given by the Supreme Lord. So because, okay, somebody may say ultimately these results are coming by karma, but then karma is something which is given by Prakriti, which is insentient, which is controlled by the Supreme Lord. And so therefore Prakriti and karma by themselves cannot give all these results. So therefore the Supreme Lord has to be in control, is in control, and that is also accepted by so many other authorities. So he gives a list of various authorities who accept the supremacy of the Lord, like Manu, Tanapad, Dhruva, Anga, Pralad, Bali. Right. And then he says that even though people like Vena don't accept the supremacy of the Lord, but then ultimately, even for getting the results of Dharma, Artha, Kama, and Moksha, one is dependent on the Supreme Lord. And so in this way, he established the presence of the Supreme Lord and the importance of worshiping the Supreme Lord, performing one's duties in as an offering to the Supreme Lord. So these are some of the instructions that we discussed yesterday. So we'll go ahead with verse number 31. So this is an important verse. So let's recite this verse. Yat pada seva biruchistapasvinam ashesha janmo pachitam malam dhiyaha sadya kshinotya anvaham edati sati yatha patangushta vinishrita sarit. By the inclination to serve the lotus feet of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, suffering humanity can immediately cleanse the dirt which has accumulated in their minds during innumerable births. Like the Ganges water which emanates from the toes of the lotus feet of the Lord, such a process immediately cleanses the mind, and thus spiritual or Krishna consciousness gradually increases. So here is describing the effect of practicing devotional service to the lotus feet of the Supreme Lord. Yat pada seva. So by performing seva to the lotus feet of the Supreme Lord, so the result is that ashesha janma upachitam malam, the malam, the contamination that has been accumulated since innumerable births, all that sadhya kshinoti, sadhya kshinoti, immediately all that dirt that has accumulated for millions of lifetimes, that is immediately destroyed. And then what happens? Okay, so that is destroyed. But what happens? Then what happens is anvaham edati sati yatha pada angushta vinisrita sarit. So at the same time, the attachment and the taste for performing devotional service increases day after day. Day after day, that taste increases. And then he's given the example of the Ganges water. Just like the Ganges water cleanses a person, so similarly, the service to the lotus feet of the Lord also cleanses the person and increases the taste for practicing devotional service, which Prabhupada translates as the spiritual or the Krishna consciousness gradually increases. If you see in the word to word, it is day after day, every day, that taste, that Krishna consciousness that increases. It's supposed to increase. It's supposed to increase. And Srila Prabhupada gives in detail a description about the effects of bathing in the Ganges and all that. Prabhupada describes in the initial part of the purport. And then further down, Prabhupada is saying, we have seen that in spite of the very black record of their past lives, persons who take to Krishna consciousness become perfectly cleansed of all dirty things and make spiritual progress very swiftly. Therefore, Prithu Maharaj advises that without the benediction of the Supreme Lord, one cannot make advancement either in so-called morality, economic development, or sense gratification. One should therefore take to the service of the Lord or Krishna consciousness and thus very soon become a perfect man as confirmed by the Gita, Kshipram Bhavati Dharmatma Shashvashantam Gachati. So being a responsible king, Prithu Maharaj recommends that everyone take shelter of the Supreme Personality of Godhead and thus be immediately purified. And further down, Prabhupada is explaining this point we did discuss to some degree yesterday. Prabhupada is writing, as Krishna takes away all the sinful reactions of a person immediately upon his surrender unto him, similarly, the external manifestation of Krishna, the representative of Krishna who acts as the mercy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, takes all the resultant actions of the sinful life of the disciple immediately after the disciple's initiation. Thus, if the disciple follows the principles instructed by the spiritual master, he remains purified and is not contaminated by the material infection. So we did discuss this point yesterday, and Srila Prabhupada in his lectures, he does say that, yes, when one surrenders to the representative of the Supreme Lord, the spiritual master, at the time of initiation, then yes, the sinful account becomes zero. But then the important point is that we have to maintain that as zero. But if we once again commit some sinful activities, aparadhs, then again we get the reactions to all of that. And therefore, Prabhupada continues, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu therefore stated that the spiritual master who plays the part of Krishna's representative has to consume all the sinful reactions of his disciple. Sometimes the spiritual master takes the risk of being overwhelmed by the sinful reactions of the disciples and undergoes a sort of tribulation due to their acceptance. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu therefore advised that one not accept many disciples. And that is a principle which Rupa Goswami also speaks about in the Nectar of Devotion. So when a devotee takes shelter of the lotus feet of the Supreme Lord, then he develops renunciation, and then he becomes detached from material sense gratification. He becomes totally attached to the lotus feet of the Lord, and thus he totally gives up any sort of attraction to material existence. That is what he's explaining in the next verse. Vinirduta shesha mano malaha kuman asanga vijnana vishesha viryavan yadangri mule krita ketana punahar na samsmritam klesha vaham prapadye. When a devotee takes shelter at the lotus feet of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, he is completely cleansed of all misunderstanding or mental speculation, and he manifests renunciation. This is possible only when one is strengthened by practicing Bhakti Yoga. Once having taken shelter at the root of the lotus feet of the Lord, a devotee never comes back to this material existence, which is full of the threefold miseries. Okay, so this is the result of taking shelter of the lotus feet and becoming purified of all the mala. So here again, the word is used, mana malaha. So this is the dirt accumulated in the mind. Here, especially the point of mental speculation is being referred to, because the mind has the tendency to speculate. So all these speculatory tendencies are destroyed by the practice of devotional service. And yes, and then the result is that na samsmritim klesha vaham prapadyate. So then one never comes back again to this material existence, which is full of kleshas. Srila Prabhupada, the purport is describing the effects of chanting of the holy names, as told by Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in the first verse of the Shikshashtakam, Chetudartha Archanam. And then in the second paragraph, he is describing about the effects of bhakti, which is characterized by vairagya and jnana. And so Prabhupada says, jnana refers to understanding that one is not his body, and vairagya means disinterest in sense gratification. These two primary principles of separation from material bondage can be realized on the strength of Bhakti Yoga. Okay, so these are the two effects we know of the practice of Bhakti Yoga. And then, of course, Prabhupada is further explaining how when one develops that understanding that I'm not the body, I'm spirit soul, then one comes to the Brahmbhuta platform. And then from the Brahmbhuta platform, that becomes a favorable situation for one to actually come to the practice of pure devotional service, as told in the Bhagavad Gita, Brahmbhuta prasannatmana shoshati na kankshati Sama sarveshu bhuteshu mad bhaktim lavate param. So when one comes to the Brahmbhuta stage, then it becomes, that's the liberated platform, then it becomes easy for one to come to the platform of pure devotional service. And then Prabhupada is, in the next paragraph, Prabhupada is mentioning, by practicing bhakti yoga, one can directly perceive his advancement in spiritual life. In other practices like karma yoga, jnana yoga, and dhyan yoga, one may not be confident about his progress. But in bhakti yoga, one can become directly aware of his progress in spiritual life. And then he is giving that famous example of tushti, pushti, kshuddhamaya, the three effects of eating. And so similarly, there are the three corresponding effects on the practice of bhakti yoga. Can somebody say what are the corresponding effects in the practice of bhakti yoga? Tushti, pushti, kshuddhapaya. Those are effects of eating. What are the corresponding effects? Somebody can briefly explain. Yes, anyone? I think so. We had discussed this in previous classes also.
I don't remember whether we had discussed in this class, but I heard long
Not
back
in this class.
that the path of jnana and yoga path, these other paths destroy the favorable impressions of the jiva also.
No. My question is, see, when there is this famous verse in the 11th canto of the Bhagavatam, which is talking about the effects of eating, which are tushti, pushti, kshuddhapaya. And so he says that similarly, on the practice of devotional service, there are three corresponding effects which are seen, which one can perceive for oneself. And therefore, Prabhupada is also quoting from Bhagavad Gita 9.2, Pratyaksha Bhagamam Dharmyam. The effects of the practice of devotional service can be directly perceived. So what are those three corresponding effects on the practice of devotional service?
Attachment to Krishna and detachment from sense gratification.
Okay, that's in general, but each of them has a corresponding effect. Tushti has a corollary effect in the practice of bhakti. Tushti, pushti, kshuddhapai, all three have corresponding effects.
The taste and mitigation of any material hankering, and also what is that? Taste in spiritual activities, and strength in devotional service, means strength to do more devotional service, and also freedom from hankering in material realm.
Right. To be more precise, so the three corresponding effects are bhakti, parishanubhava, and virakti. So this is something which Srila Prabhupada spoke very often, and so it's very important that we know these effects, because this is, as Srila Prabhupada says, just like when one eats, no one needs to give a certificate. One can understand for oneself, oh, now I'm full, now I don't have to eat. It's not that somebody has to tell, please stop eating, now you've eaten enough. Nobody needs to tell, we understand ourselves. So similarly, Srila Prabhupada says that even on the practice of devotional service, we can understand for ourselves whether I'm progressing or not. We can definitely confirm from other devotees, but we ourselves can understand whether I'm progressing or not. So how tushti, the satisfaction, is analogous to bhakti. So why? Because as when one actually practices pure devotional service, Savai pumsam paro dharmo yato bhakti radokshaje ahituki apratiyata yayatma suprasiddhati. So when one practices pure devotional service, ahituki apratiyata, without any motivations, without any interruption, then that type of devotional service will lead to suprasiddhati, complete satisfaction. So therefore, when one practices devotional service, pure devotional service, then to the degree one the practice is pure, to that degree one will experience satisfaction. One will experience satisfaction. When one experiences satisfaction, one's love for the Lord, one's enthusiasm to practice devotional service further increases. So that is why tushti is analogous to bhakti. Then pushti, or nourishment, is analogous to pareshanubhava. Para Isha Anubhava means a direct experience of the Supreme Lord. So when one practices devotional service, one can experience a reciprocation from the Lord. One gets a better and better realization of the Lord. And that realization of the Lord actually increases one's faith. And that faith actually nourishes one's devotional service. As we know that the progress in devotional service is based on faith. And so the faith increases as one practices pure devotional service, and that nourishes one's devotional creeper. And so therefore, the pushti is analogous to parishanubhava. And if these two are there, if the tushti and pushti are there, then automatically there is virakti. So the Shuddhapaya, or the cessation of hunger, is analogous to virakti. That is total detachment from all material things. And so these are the effects of the practice of devotional service. And so one can know for oneself whether one is practicing in bhakti yoga. And so that's how, and so therefore towards the end of the purport, Prabhupada is saying, by bhakti yoga, these two qualities are diminished. That means the qualities of rajas and tamas are diminished, and one becomes situated in the mode of goodness. Gradually surpassing the mode of goodness, one is situated in pure goodness, which is not contaminated with the material qualities. When thus situated, a devotee no longer has any doubts. He knows that he will not come back to this material world. So these are the effects of the practice of pure devotional service, which Prithu Maharaj is talking about. And so therefore, he is requesting his citizens to practice pure devotional service, by which they don't have to come once again to this material existence. Okay, so now the next question may arise to the citizens. The citizen may ask, okay, so we are ordinary householders, grihasthas. How are we supposed to practice pure devotional service? And so Prithu Maharaj is answering that question in the next verse. Tameva yuyam bhajatatma vrittibir mano vacha kaya gune swakarmabhi amayana kama dugangrik pankajam yatha dikara vasitartha siddhayaha. Prithu Maharaj advised the citizens, engaging your minds, your words, your bodies, and the results of your occupational duties, and being always open-minded, you should all render devotional service to the Lord according to your abilities and the occupations in which you are situated. You should engage your service at the lotus feet of the Supreme Personality of Godhead with full confidence and without reservation. Then you will surely be successful in achieving the final objective in your lives. Okay, so he's requesting them to basically perform the occupational duties, vritti, your own occupational duties, but at the same time, mana, vacha, kaya. So, but at the same time, engaging the mind, words, and body in devotional service. Angri pankajam. So, by performing devotional service at the lotus feet of the Supreme Lord. At the same time, he is specifying some important qualities in this practice of devotional service. What are they? Amayinaha. Amayinaha means without reservation. So without any reservation, without any grudges, without any duplicity, perform devotional service. And also he says, yatha adhikara, according to your ability. According to your ability refers to the Varnashram situation. Varnashram situation means basically propensities. So based upon one's propensities, psychophysical nature, yatha adhikara, one should offer service to the Supreme Lord. And avasita artha, fully convinced of one's interest. So being fully convinced with full confidence, without reservation. And so in this way, he is telling the citizens to practice devotional service by performing the conditional duties, that is the Varnashram duties, and at the same time, the constitutional duties, and that is the devotional service to the Supreme Lord. So Prabhupada is speaking about Chaturvanyamaya Shrishtam, and then further down Prabhupada is saying, therefore, he's talking about the Brahmanical qualities by, so if one comes to the mode of goodness by the practice of Varnashram duties, then one can develop the Brahmanical qualities. And then he says, everyone's aim should be to satisfy the Supreme Personality of Godhead by engaging his mind in thinking always of Krishna, his words in always offering praise to the Lord or preaching about the glories of the Lord, and his body in executing the service required to satisfy the Lord. So in this way, one can engage body, mind, and words in the service of the Supreme Lord, along with the execution of one's Varnashram duties. In the next paragraph, Prabhupada is raising a question. The question may be raised that since the Lord is to be worshipped by great demigods like Lord Brahma, Lord Shiva, and others, how can an ordinary human being on this planet serve him? And this is clearly explained by Prithu Maharaj by the use of the word yatha adhikara, according to one's ability. If one sincerely executes his occupational duty, that will be sufficient. One does not need to become like Lord Brahma, Lord Shiva, Indra, Lord Chaitanya, or Ramacharya, whose capabilities are certainly far above ours. Even a Shudra, who is in the lowest stage of life according to the material qualities, can achieve the same success. Okay, so that's the meaning of Yatha Adhikar. So according to one's ability, according to one's capacity, while executing one's occupational duties, then at the same time, one can practice devotional service. Another important quality he is saying, anyone can become successful in devotional service provided he displays no duplicity. It is explained here that one must be very frank and open-minded. Amayinaha. And then he's saying to be situated in low status of life is not a disqualification for success in devotional service. The only qualification is that whether one is Brahmana, Kshatriya, Vaishya, or Shudra, he must be open, frank, and free from reservations. Then by performing his particular occupational duty under the guidance of a proper spiritual master, he can achieve the highest success in life. And then towards the end, he says, the Lord's lotus feet are described here as Kama, Dugangri, Pankajam, because they have all power to fulfill the desires of everyone. A devotee is happy even in this life, because although in material existence we have many needs, all his material needs are satisfied. And when he at last quits his body, he goes back home, back to Godhead without a doubt. Okay, so we all know the principle of Yoga Kshema Vahamiham. So yes, the Lord is ready to fulfill, provided one is ready to practice this type of devotional service without duplicity, without any reservations. And so the quality of devotional service is something which is very important in order to attract the mercy of the Lord. So we'll just read Vishnu Achakda's commentary on this verse. Okay, before we come to this discussion. Okay, somebody can read this, please.
Commentary. Since we have drawn in household karma yoga, how can we worship with pure bhakti? Prithu then advised to do karma mishra bhakti, worship the Lord by the actions of the varnas, sacrifice, protection, agriculture, and service, so karma bhi. Along with these occupations, atma vritti bhi, worship with the qualities of the mind, voice, and body, remembering the Lord, chanting and offering obeisances, or worship with actions, swakarma bhi, of mind, voice, and body, and with your occupational duties for livelihood. If one's work is engaged for the Lord's service, or at least some portion is engaged on a steady basis, then that becomes bhakti. Those who have determined the object of perfection, avistartha siddhayaha, without surpassing their varna, yathadhikara, should worship him in this way. Or those who by doing their prescribed occupation for the pleasure of the Lord make it perfect, should worship the Lord in this way. By taking the meaning to be worship the Lord along with prescribed duties of varnashrama, swakarma bhi, which are one's livelihood, atma vritti bhi, bhakti becomes predominant.
Okay, so like Krishna also speaks in the 18th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, Swakarmana tam abhyarcha. So one can perform one's swakarma according to one ashram, but at the same time offer the results to him, Krishna says, to him, to the Lord. So he usually refers to Vishnu, Paramatma. So therefore Krishna says him, tam abhyarcha. So the same principle is what Prithu Maharaj is telling these citizens. So perform occupational duties, but at the same time, offer them to the Lord. And at the same time, one can also perform the Navida Bhakti, offering mind, body, words to the Supreme Lord. Now, we thought of having a small discussion on this point of amayinaha, because the quality of the practice of devotional service is very important. And so amayina, as Prabhupada is saying, no duplicity. So what do you think are some of the reasons why there could be duplicitous behavior, kutinati, in the practices of devotional service? Why could this contamination come in the practice of devotional service? Can somebody say a few reasons?
When one has ulterior motives.
Like?
So we may want some name, fame, prestige, or some material facilities, honor.
Okay, fine. So some material desires, like a desire for puja la pratishtha. So all these things may result in some duplicitous behavior. Yes, correct. Yes, Satipriya Prabhu.
Sometimes devotee doesn't have, he doesn't have that much awareness of himself, and he is still contaminated by modes, Rajagun and Tamagun. So he is not aware of his actions, what he is doing or what he is supposed to do. So maybe because of that, because of his previous conditioning, he's continued those things.
Okay, so there's some previous conditioning and he's unaware of that. So therefore, there's some contamination in his practice. Okay, fine, correct. Some other reasons?
When we feel that when we want to show ourselves to be great, or we want to pose ourselves good in the eyes of others, naturally there is a tendency to be something which we are not.
Right.
And also sometimes when we want to we have some controllership mentalities, so we want to capture some services, take a hold over it. So we act in a duplicitous way there also.
Right. So whether it's controllership mentality or whether we want to pose ourselves as someone very special. So then obviously we have to put on a show, which we may not be actually on that platform. So therefore then there can be some duplicitous behavior. Yes. Yes, Vrindan Primati.
The tendency of a mind is which if we get things very easily, then we are not having the importance of that, and we desire for something else. So at that time, the duplicity arises.
Okay, fine. So again, it's a desire for various facilities and things like that. Okay, fine. So what could be the result of this sort of duplicitous behavior?
One more point I want to add.
Please go ahead.
Like devotees, they practice, anybody who practices bhakti, so he knows that bhakti is best for me. But at the same time, he's not able to give up the material attachments. And he wants to continue bhakti. So therefore, he has to do some manipulation to continue bhakti, at the same time also continue material things.
Okay, fine. Yes, so there are material attachments and he wants those along with the practice of bhakti. So one may have to, yes, do some manipulative things in order to achieve those material things along with the practice of bhakti. Okay, yes, good point. Yes. Okay, so what could be the effects of such duplicitous behavior in the practice of devotional service?
In such a state, we are not able to feelingly take shelter of the Lord, feelingly chant the holy name of the Lord, because it appears to be a illusory state, because we are posing, we are trying to be something which we are not. So we are in a condition, means we are in something like illusory state. We are not able to take fully shelter of the Lord. No?
Okay, so we're not able to take shelter of the Lord. Okay, good point. Something else? Yes, Mother.
It's a miserable condition actually. Every time trying to prove it that I am the best, or to prove that leadership, or to try to having the controlling mentality. So every time the mind is plotting, okay, next what. So bhakti is aside. Bhakti is becomes a secondary, and this becomes a primary goal.
Okay, so obviously one will be in miserable condition because one wants to pose oneself as someone very special, someone very on a very elevated platform, and at the same time one is trying to fulfill some material desires. So that obviously leads to a lot of distress in one's practice of devotional service. Yes, yes, Rajlekha.
We feel, just a minute. We feel dry in heart. Like even though we are practicing bhakti, we don't feel that satisfaction. We do understand that we are lacking somewhere, and we know that we are not practicing in proper way. Like we have to cross some miles. We have to, but we are not ready to accept it.
Okay, fine, good point. Yes,
Dry heart.
yes, a dry heart. There won't be satisfaction, because satisfaction comes from quality of devotional service, as we just discussed. Ahitukiha pratiyata. Okay, take one point from Krishna Mother.
Prabhuji, gradually he will even drift away if his desires are not, fulfilled of name, fame, and all. He might even actually leave the movement and go
Okay,
into
yes, he could drift away from Krishna consciousness also, because the material motives are not being satisfied. That's correct. Okay, somebody in the classroom?
Prabhuji, it will lead to aparad. And it will slow down the speed in progress of bhakti, because I'm mixing other things which are not pure and staying with devotees who are pure. So therefore, surely somewhere there will be friction.
Yes, definitely. Yes, that also could be an effect. There could be various aparadhs because one is not getting one's motives fulfilled. Then one could try to fulfill them somehow by hook or by crook. Then obviously that could lead to aparadhs. Yes. So we will just, I don't remember whether we have discussed this in our Dhruv Maharaj section, but in any case, in context of our discussion right now, we will see a few quotes from Srila Prabhupada as well as from Gaur Govind Maharaj. Because this type of tendencies definitely are there with conditioned souls, but definitely pose an important, a major obstacle in one's practices of devotional service. So somebody can read from the screen, please.
Patitya and Kapatya. His Holiness Gaur Govind Swami. So those who are speculators, crooked persons, kapti, they only speculate. They will not accept things as it is. They never accept the essence, sar. They accept vastu and avastu. And avastu, they accept vastu as avastu and avastu as vastu. Sat as asat and asat as sat. Real as unreal and unreal as real. Therefore, Sadhu, Guru and Mahajanas have said that one who is very serious, very eager to achieve perfection in his human birth, which is Krishna Bhakti, to get Krishna, should be very simple. He should cultivate simplicity. Simplicity is Vaishnavism. Those who are real sadhus, Vaishnavas, are simple by nature. They are not crooked at all. This crookedness, kapatya, is a great hindrance on the path of perfection. This is a sort of disease, patitya and kapatya. One who is a crooked person, who has developed crookedness, even becomes envious towards the doctor who has come to cure him. He becomes envious of the doctor, so his disease is incurable. Continue.
Continue, please.
Sri Jiva Goswami has written in his Bhakti Sandarbha about this, Patitya and Kapatya. Jiva Goswami says that there are many persons who pretend themselves to be very devotional, but in their heart there is great crookedness. Outwardly, they pay dandavats like a rod. They fall down from a long distance. But in their heart, they are very crooked. They have no respect at all. They criticize the sadhus, acharyas, gurus, Vaishnavas, but outwardly they pay dandavat as if they were very humble and have a very devotional attitude. They act like this. They offer worship also, but in their hearts there is great duplicity. Jiva Goswami has also said in his Bhakti Sandarbha that they cannot make any advancement on this path of perfection. Such persons take to karma, jnana, yoga, tapasya, tyaga, niti, morality. They speak about morality, renunciation, and detachment. They speak about penance, jnana, yoga, all these things. And they practice externally something also. They pose themselves as very moral persons, but in their heart, they are very crooked. Such hardness is in their heart. Outwardly, they pay dandavat and offer worship to sadhu, guru, but they are very keen to find faults of that sadhu, guru, Vaishnava.
Okay, so this type of crooked behavior, kutinati, could be there in a sadhaka. And so outwardly one may pose oneself as a very humble, respectful devotee, but inwardly one has so much of envy, and one is critical and all that. So therefore, Gaurvan Maharaj, he says that it is very important that one cultivates simplicity. And Srila Prabhupada in his purpose also explains simplicity means one is straightforward, ready to speak the truth even to an enemy. So as far as devotees, sadhus are concerned, there is no place for crooked behavior. There is no place for telling lies and pretending something which one is not. So all these things have no place in a sadhu's life. So otherwise they pose great obstacles, because one's mind will always be disturbed. One will always be thinking, oh, I told this lie. I did something which I should not be doing. So how to cover up for that? So as it is said, one lie leads to 100 lies. So whole life becomes very, very complicated. The mind is always disturbed, very difficult to focus on the holy name. So therefore, it is very, very important that Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur very often said, Saralta e Vaishnavata. Vaishnava means he should be simple. Outward, inward, it must be the same. There is no crookedness.
Prabhuji, I have a question. Can I ask now?
No, we'll just complete the discussion. So, Gaurvan Maharaj goes on. Somebody else can read, please. So here is describing what is one of the major causes of this sort of kapatya.
The supreme perfection of human life is to achieve Krishna Prem. Raghunath Das Goswami and Bhakti Vinod Thakur have both said that if you are serious and eager to achieve this goal, then you must give up kapatya, crookedness, immediately. Otherwise, you cannot achieve this goal, Krishna Prem. This Manashisha is saying to the stupid mind, oh mind, stupid mind, you listen to me, my confidential instructions. Pratishtha Drishta Sopacha Ramani me Hrdi Nati Katham Sadhu Prema Sprisati Suchir Etan Nanu Mana. If you run after this Pratishtha, this is Vishta, the stool of a hog, and a shameless Chandalini. As long as this shameless Chandalini is dancing in your heart, you cannot tread this path of devotional service at all. This kapate is the paramar of Pratishtha. As long as this desire for Pratishtha is there in your heart, you cannot give up kapatya, because kapate is its paramar. That is said, you cannot be freed from this kapate at all. As long as this Pratishtha is there, Pratishtha is shameless Chandalini. Therefore, the instruction is that one who is very serious and eager to achieve this ultimate goal, the supreme goal of human life, this Krishna Prem, should immediately give up this kapatya, crookedness.
Gaurvan Maharaj gives a very down-to-earth example. He says that, so sometimes we are sitting in prasadam line and somebody is serving prasadam. So the server is asking, would you like to have more prasadam? So one is, to give an example, maybe somebody is serving gulab jamuns. Already one has 2 gulab jamuns in the plate, but one has a desire for one more. But then one wants to show that, no, I'm sense controlled. So even though he wants, but externally he says, no, I don't want. But internally he feels, no, I want actually. So this is the example which he gives. So that means one has the desire for some pratishtha. One wants to pose oneself as advanced and all that. And so therefore he makes an external show. So therefore one has to be simple. And this is of course a very simple example, which may not have very serious consequences, but then one can extrapolate the mentality to so many other situations in life. One may want to pose as being sincere, as being advanced, but at the same time one has other desires. And so therefore then in between posing oneself and the reality, there is a tug of war. And therefore then that poses great obstacles in one's progress. So then he describes what is the solution. Read.
Unconditional surrender. How can you give it up? You should humbly surrender. Unconditionally surrender unto the lotus feet of Guru and Gauranga. One who is very dear to Guru and Gauranga immediately surrenders with a simple heart. Surrender unto that Vaishnava sadhu and serve him, please him. So by his mercy, you will be freed from this shameless Chandalini and Kapatya. Otherwise, you cannot free yourself from this. Bhakti Vinod Thakur cries and says, when will that day come that I will be freed from all these things and get Radha Krishna Premadhan?
Okay, so when that sincerity is there, sincerity to surrender, one sincerely surrenders to the instructions, and one sincerely wants to purify oneself, that attracts the mercy of Guru and Krishna, and by that one will be able to get purified of all these anarthas and ultimately attain Krishna Prem. So otherwise, with all this kapatya, with all this cheating mentality, crookedness, so one may achieve so many material things of this world. Even within the realm of devotional service, one could achieve puja, la, pratishna, all that one could achieve by all that kapatya and cheating, but one will be cheated by Krishna of the ultimate goal, and that is Premadhan. So in connection to this Kutinati, so these are quotes from Srila Prabhupada's purports in the Chaitanya Charitamrita in Rupa Shiksha, teachings of Rupa Goswami to teachings of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu to Rupa Goswami. So we'll just go through this because all these are something which are very, very important in the lives of devotees, practicing devotees. And so therefore we have taken this so that we remind ourselves of these important points. Please read.
Chaitanya Charitamrita, Madhya Lila 19.159. Some unnecessary creepers growing with the Bhakti creeper are the creepers of behavior unacceptable for those trying to attain perfection. Diplomatic behavior, animal killing, mundane profiteering, mundane adoration, and mundane importance. All these are unwanted creepers. Purport. There is a certain pattern of behavior prescribed for those actually trying to become perfect. In our Krishna consciousness movement, we advise our students not to eat meat, not to gamble, not to engage in illicit sex, and not to indulge in intoxication. People who indulge in these activities can never become perfect. Therefore, these regulative principles are for those interested in becoming perfect and going back to Godhead. Kotinati or diplomatic behavior cannot satisfy the Atma, the soul. It cannot even satisfy the body or the mind. The culprit mind is always suspicious. Therefore, our dealing should always be straightforward and approved by Vedic authorities. If we treat people diplomatically or duplicitously, our spiritual advancement is obstructed.
Okay, so this is Prabhupada's writing on Kutinati. So what are the results of this Kutinati diplomatic behavior? Cannot satisfy the Atma. And then he says, forget about the Atma, cannot satisfy the body or the mind, because the mind is always suspicious. You know, somebody is having crooked behavior, the mind is always suspicious. Oh, is this fellow going to find out that I'm doing something wrong? I'm doing something crooked. Will this person find out? Will this person find out? So all one's dealings will become very suspicious. And so therefore, if you want, so therefore the mind will always be disturbed. And when the mind is disturbed, then the body also is disturbed. So that's how mind, body, soul, everything gets disturbed. Ultimately, the person is not satisfied. by such crooked behavior and dealings. So therefore he says dealing should always be straightforward and approved by Vedic authorities. So that's the reason why Gauravan Maharaj says just surrender. So if one simply follows instructions as it is, then one is one has no one is very peaceful. One thinks, oh, I'm just following instructions, whatever I'm told, I'm doing. So then one can always be peaceful. But if we are indulging in such diplomatic, duplicitous behavior, spiritual advancement is obstructed, because ultimately, of course, the Vaishnavas as well as Krishna are not going to be pleased. Please go ahead. Sorry. So
these obstructions have been described in this verse as unwanted creepers. They simply present obstacles for the real creeper, the Bhakti Lata. One should be very careful to avoid all these unwanted things. Sometimes these unwanted creepers look exactly like the Bhakti creeper. They appear to be of the same size and the same species when they are packed together with the Bhakti creeper. But in spite of this, the creepers are called Upasaka. A pure devotee can distinguish between the Bhakti creeper and a mundane creeper, and he is very alert to distinguish them and keep them separate.
Okay, so in between, of course, Srila Prabhupada describes about the other Upashakas also, but we didn't take the entire purport. Towards the end of the purport, Prabhupada writes this. So one of the great challenges is that these Upashakas, they look exactly like the Bhakti creeper, and it becomes very difficult to distinguish. He says same size, same species, everything looks same. So therefore, superficially, it becomes very difficult to understand. And so therefore, we do find that somebody appears to be progressing very wonderfully. And there is so many achievements, so many wonderful things are happening. And everyone feels that one is progressing very nicely. But then all of a sudden we find there are some major obstacles, major challenges. So this is how, so actually what has been growing are the Upashakas. The Upashakas have been growing and they have been taking all the nourishment. And it appears as if good spiritual progress is being made. But then what is actually happening is that is the Upashakas which are growing. So therefore, Prabhupada ends the purport by saying a pure devotee can distinguish between the Bhakti creeper and the mundane creeper, and is very alert to distinguish them and keep them separate. So therefore, it requires some introspection, sincerity, and taking guidance from other Vaishnavas to actually be able to distinguish them. On one's own, it is very difficult to distinguish always. So therefore, taking guidance from Vaishnavas and having that core sincerity, if one has that core sincerity, then Krishna from within the heart also will help one to distinguish between the Bhakti creeper and the mundane creeper. Okay, so then here is describing what will happen if one does not distinguish. Please go ahead.
One does not distinguish between the Bhakti creeper and the other creepers. The sprinkling of water is misused because the other creepers are nourished, while the Bhakti creeper is curtailed. Purport: if one chants the Hare Krishna, if one chants the Hare Krishna mantra while committing offenses, these unwanted creepers will grow. One should not take advantage of chanting the Hare Krishna mantra for some material profit. As mentioned in verse 159, Nishiddhachara Kutinata Jiva Himsa Labha Puja Pratishthaadi Yata Upashakaghan. The unwanted creepers have been described by Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur. He states that if one hears and chants without trying to give up offenses, one becomes materially attached to sense gratification. One may also desire freedom from material bondage like the Mayavadis, or one may become attached to the Yoga Siddhis and desire wonderful yogic powers. If one is attached to wonderful material activities, one is called Siddhi Lobhi, greedy for material perfection. One may also be victimized by diplomatic and crooked behavior, or one may associate with women for illicit sex.
Okay, so one of the major causes for all these weeds to grow is chanting the Hare Krishna mantra while committing offenses. Okay, so therefore, very important that one pay great attention to chanting the Hare Krishna mantra, So chanting attentively, that is the root cause of all the offenses. So paying great attention to chanting the holy names, not compromising as far as the chanting is concerned, and at the same time being very careful about the 10 offenses against the holy name. So all these one has to be extremely careful. Otherwise, one may be performing chanting and everything else, but if one is not careful to avoid the offenses, then all these upashakas grow, and that is how they get nourished while the bhakti creeper is curtailed. And Prabhupada gives a whole list of various anarthas that may come up because of chanting with offenses. So therefore, one has to be extremely careful while chanting the holy names. One cannot take these things casually. Okay, please go ahead.
As soon as an intelligent devotee sees an unwanted creeper growing beside the original creeper, he must cut it down instantly. Then the real creeper, the Bhakti Lata, grows nicely, return home, back to Godhead, and seeks shelter under the lotus feet of Krishna. Purport. If one is misled by unwanted creepers and is victimized, he cannot make progress back to Godhead. Rather, he remains within the material world and engages in activities having nothing to do with pure devotional service. Such a person may be elevated to the higher planetary systems, but because he remains within this material world, he is subjected to the threefold material miseries.
Okay, fine. Okay, so now to end our discussion on this, the quality of the practice of devotional service, which Prithu Maharaj is talking about, that one must practice devotional service, but at the same time, one must perform it amayinaha, without reservation, without duplicity, with full confidence. So in this purport, and as we just mentioned this yesterday also, but we wanted to show this entire purport, that what is the solution to all this, how one can wonderfully progress in devotional service and attract the mercy of Guru and Krishna. Prabhupada is very beautifully describing in this purport. Please read.
The Krishna consciousness movement has spread all over the world within a very short.
Translation also before that.
The wonderful festival and installation of Sri Gopalji was arranged in one day. Suddenly, all this was accomplished by the potency of Gopal. No one but a devotee can understand this. The Krishna consciousness movement has spread all over the world within a very short time, within 5 years. And mundane people are very much astonished at this. However, by grace of Lord Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, we understand that everything is possible by the grace of Krishna. Why does Krishna have to take 5 years? In 5 days, he can spread his name and fame all over the world like wildfire. Those who have faith in and devotion to Krishna can understand that these things happen so wonderfully by the grace of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. They're simply the instruments. If the preachers in our Krishna consciousness movement are sincere devotees of Krishna, Krishna will always be with them because he is very kind and favorable to all his devotees. Just as Arjuna and Krishna were victorious in the battle of Kurukshetra, this Krishna conscious movement will surely emerge victorious if we but remain sincere devotees of Lord and serve the Lord according to the advice of the predecessors, the 6 Goswamis and other devotees of the Lord. As Narottam Das Thakur has stated, Tandera Charana Sevi Bhakta Sanevas Janama Janama Hoy Abhilash. The Krishna consciousness devotees must always desire to remain in the society of devotees. Bhakta Sanevas. They cannot go outside the Krishna consciousness society or movement. Within the society, we must try to serve the predecessors by preaching Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's cult and spreading his name and fame all over the world. If we attempt this seriously within the society, it will be very successfully done. There is no question of estimating how this will happen in the mundane sense. But without a doubt, it happens by the grace of Krishna.
Okay, so a very beautiful purport. Srila Prabhupada is describing how we can be really successful in the Krishna consciousness movement. So the important sentence here is that Yes, this Krishna consciousness movement will surely emerge victorious if, now two conditions Srila Prabhupada is putting. One is remain sincere devotees of the Lord, and second is serve the Lord according to the advice of the predecessors, the acharyas. So these are the two important things that by which we can become victorious individually and collectively as a movement. And so therefore, it is very important that we remain sincere. Srila Prabhupada very often said this: sincere, serious, without ulterior motives. That means no kutinati, no duplicity. And so therefore, it is very important that we always stick to these core principles. And then the second point Prabhupada is saying is to serve the Lord according to the advice of the predecessor acharyas, without any mental speculation. As we were reading, Gauragovind Maharaj says that one of the symptoms of kutinati is mental speculation. So one tends to mentally speculate and speak so many things and do so many things according to one's mental speculation, and pose one just to pose oneself as being somebody wonderful, somebody special. I know something more than others. So all these things are there. And so therefore, it is very important that we very carefully read and understand Srila Prabhupada's instructions for us, especially within ISKCON. That is something which is very important. Prabhupada again here, he says that not go outside the Krishna consciousness society or movement. And so therefore, very important for us to read these beautiful purports of Srila Prabhupada. Prabhupada gives direct instructions to ISKCON devotees within his purports. And so therefore, it is very important that within our courses, whether it is Bhakti Shastri, Bhakti Vaibhav, Bhakti Vedanta, it is very important that we focus on Srila Prabhupada's purports and Srila Prabhupada's instruction. This is actually the purpose of these courses, to very scrutinizingly study the Bhaktivedanta purports. So if we don't scrutinizingly study Srila Prabhupada's purports within these courses, we will miss all these valuable instructions which Prabhupada has given for us. And we may actually do a great disservice to Srila Prabhupada. So therefore, it may be okay that we study and read other acharyas' commentaries and all that. That may be all right, but that cannot be done at the expense of Srila Prabhupada's purpose and Srila Prabhupada's instructions, because they're so vital for our progress in devotional service within the society. And so therefore, that's something which is very important. And so if we stick to what Srila Prabhupada has given us, then that's how we can beautifully progress. So therefore, these courses that we are organizing also, this is simply fulfilling the instruction of Srila Prabhupada, that's all. Srila Prabhupada wanted these courses to happen, and that is why we are conducting these courses. And also another important point, Srila Prabhupada definitely wanted a Bhagavad Gita class in the evening. This Radheshan Prabhu also was saying. But we are not conducting the Bhagavad Gita class every day. Prabhupada wanted every day, 30 days in a month. If you say 30 hours of Bhagavad Gita class, that we are not having. We are having a substitute for that in the form of these. And this we are having only 15 hours. That's half the time. So, but of course, time for studying. But in any case, we are not doing something which is special or something which is outside Srila Prabhupada's instructions. This is very much within what Srila Prabhupada wanted us to do. And so if we want to show our gratitude to Srila Prabhupada, it's very important that we stick to these instructions and very carefully read and study Srila Prabhupada's purports to understand Srila Prabhupada's mood and mission, and thereby make advancement. And so here, Pritham Maharaj is also emphasizing, as we will see in this chapter, next chapter again, we will see that how a great emphasis is laid on practicing devotional service according to the instructions of the predecessor acharyas. This is something which is an important point, which even Pritham Maharaj in the next chapter, Sanat Kumar, he also very much emphasizes these points. Therefore, I covered many points actually within this discussion, many instructions which are going to come even in the next chapter, Sanat Kumar's instructions. So we won't go into all this detailed discussion when we discuss those points. Therefore, I clubbed everything together within this discussion. So in any case, if somebody has some important comments or questions on this discussion, you're welcome. Okay, Krishna Mataji.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji. Prabhuji, it is seen that many times that we have a lot of instructions given to us by our spiritual masters, by authorities, but it is very difficult in the day-to-day life following all those instructions. We have the intention of following, we have those right moods also, but it is very difficult to follow those instructions because most of the instructions are based on time, place, and circumstances. So then how can I reconcile this and how can I understand that?
Okay. Of course, there may be many instructions, but the important point is that we are sincerely trying to follow them. So we may not be perfectly following them, but at least our sincerity is that we continue to make an attempt to try and follow them. And as far as you mentioned the point that instructions are going to time, place, and circumstances, that does not apply to instructions which are especially there in Srila Prabhupada's purports. Srila Prabhupada's purports instructions are universal, meant for all time, place, and circumstances. We could say that instructions given in letters or some conversations may be contextual, but instructions that are given in the purports are definitely trans-contextual. They are applicable in all contexts. Is that okay? Yes, Vrindan Premati.
Prabhuji, sometimes leader or persons have to be diplomatic in some decisions. So means in some situations, which is somewhat similar as a duplicity, means how to understand the difference between the duplicity and diplomacy.
Okay, good question. Srila Prabhupada addresses this in one of his lectures. In one of his lectures, Srila Prabhupada actually speaks on this topic quite extensively, giving the examples of Raghunath Das Goswami, Rup Goswami, Sanatan Goswami. All of them acted duplicitously or diplomatically. So Raghunath Das Goswami is dealing with the Muslim Chaudhary who came to arrest him, and Rup Goswami and Sanatan Goswami in their dealings with the Muslim Qazi and trying to escape from the service of Nawab Hussain Shah. So in all those cases, they acted diplomatically, but the important point is, what was the goal? The goal in all those cases was simply service of the Lord. There was no other personal motivation in their behavior. And so if that is the sole intention in some diplomatic behavior, Srila Prabhupada quotes a Chanakya Pandit verse, which says that for those who are crooked, one may have to deal in a crooked way. Shut up. So if one is having that dealing in a crooked way, then a materialistic person, then one may have to deal in a similar way. But the goal is what is very important. So therefore, Srila Prabhupada puts that famous statement in first Canto 13th chapter in connection to Dhritarashtra leaving home without informing his secretary Sanjay. The Prabhupada writes that statement: great souls cheat for a great cause. So yes, but that is the important point. The cause has to be great. The cause has to be great. Then the cheating can be justified. As far as we are concerned, we may always have some material motivations when we cheat. And so therefore, as far as we are concerned, my understanding is that it is best that we consult senior devotees, senior authorities, before we indulge in some diplomatic behavior. Then we are always safe. Okay, thank you. Okay, anyone has questions in the classroom?
Hare Krishna.
Yes.
The example which was been quoted by Gaur Govind Maharaj about the Kapatya, which was really somewhat difficult to understand, that the person who is externally showing off that he is not inclined to, but externally he is showing that he is not inclined to have this sense enjoyment, but internally he is struggling. So this example is like for everyone, for many of us, it is that internal things are pulling us, but externally we are just trying to control. So how we can understand it is like the struggling with the sincerity and the kapatya. It is
right.
Is there any borderline difference?
Yes. So actually everything is based on what's the goal and what's the motivation. So if the sincerity is, one is sincerely struggling to become a better devotee. So that is sincerity. So so internally there are some material cravings, but externally one is trying to control, and there is always going to be some tussle, some tug of war between the two. That is fine. But here what he's speaking about is, what is the purpose in the external struggle or in the external manifestation of the struggle? What is the purpose? That makes the whole difference. So if the purpose is to just make a big show that I'm advanced, then that is the kapati. The sincerity is one is sincerely struggling to make progress. The kapati is one simply wants to make a show. That is the basic difference. So therefore, ultimately one has to ask oneself, why am I doing what I'm doing? So is it to make a show, or is it to sincerely progress? Does it help, Anango Prabhu? And if anybody else wants to add some points, most welcome. Senior devotees are there, Sundarsham Prabhu and so many other seniors are there. If anyone wants to add, please feel free to add points.
Initially, whenever the person is doing a devotional service, it is out of somewhat like the social customs he has to follow, that okay, what the others are speaking about me, or that way, like the devotees in a association of the devotees, they are knowing that if I do such things, then it will be like blemish to me and my character also. So out of that also, if somebody is doing a devotional service, whether it is a kapatya.
See, ultimately, so if one wants to try to practice devotional service nicely, so that one's own character and is not blemished, and there's no blemish on Guru and Krishna. So again, that is sincerity. That is sincerity. The kapati is if one is doing it simply to make a big show. That is the kapati. So if one is hankering for pujala pratishna out of it, then that is the kapati. If one is sincerely trying to please Guru and Krishna so that there's no blemish, then that's all. Okay.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji, I have one.
Okay, go ahead.
Prabhuji, how now previous verses you have shown from CC 1.59, sorry, 19.159 all. It is mentioned that that kind of crooked person has same like he show off is doing like paying obeisances and acting in as a pure devotee. How to understand by seeing someone whether they are I mean, because we follow every leader, right? So even we have that kind of, I'm talking about myself. So how to understand that person, because we are associating with them. So we always say that with whomsoever we associate, we get their qualities. So in that case.
Okay, fine. So as far as all these points are concerned, the best thing is to apply them personally and take all these points mostly for personal application. These things are something which are very internal, very subtle. And so therefore to judge somebody else becomes very difficult. And so therefore, when we're talking about others, it is always better to give a benefit of doubts and think that others are definitely sincere, but it is more for my own personal application. That is my understanding of how we can take this, because judging others could be deceptive sometimes. And so, and of course, if one has doubts about anyone's behavior, then it is always best to confirm with some other senior devotees. That's my understanding.
Thank you.
Thank you. Hare Krishna.
In this CC Madhya purport which I mentioned, Prabhuji, just wanted to inform like that 4.1.7 it is written actually. But I was unable to not find that. I was able to find in 4.79. So that.
Acha, it's not 179, it's 79.
Yes, Prabhuji.
Okay. Sorry. Thank you for that.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna.
Prabhuji, like wealth is one of the opulence which can be utilized in service of the Lord.
Right.
Right. There's the 6 opulences. So the fame is also one of the opulence of 6 opulences. Right. George Harrison was so famous. So he could touch to so many people. Right. Because in modern world we see famous people attract more attention and they reach to more people. Right? So how do we see that fame is sometimes so much criticized, but not wealth sometimes?
Okay,
because
so yes,
we're after wealth, right? We seek wealth for utilizing the service of the Lord, right?
Yes, so if we desire something for using in the service of the Lord, then that's fine. So just like Madhvendra Puri, he became famous, and the CC actually mentions that how he used his fame in getting the chandan. So that was the service of the Lord. So everything can be used in the service of the Lord. If the motive is self-aggrandizement and for one's own satisfaction, so then that's an anartha. But everything can be used in the service of the Lord. Prabhupada's famous example, all the opulences are zero, but you put one before them, then yes, then the value increases. So ultimately, everything depends on what's the motive and what's the purpose.
Okay, yes, Prabhuji.
Any last question before or comments before we take a break?
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji.
Hare.
Srila Prabhupada mentions that devotees should be very straightforward. Now, should be ready to tell the secrets even to one's enemy. To what extent we can follow this? Because now we understand that the situation outside means like even to outside world or even staying in the association of devotees. So many times we like the tendency is not to. So we cannot reveal our means many things, our personal things to everyone. So to what extent we can follow this principle? And
Yes, so as you said, it is the principle that has to be understood, and it's not that we can go with the mic and announce all our deficiencies and all our problems to the whole world. So obviously we have to use our intelligence, but the important point is being truthful, being honest, being in simple things, being honest in exams, being honest in classes, being honest in so many day-to-day activities. Prabhupada writes in the Bali Maharaj and Vamandev section, in the present day in Kali Yuga, there is a tendency to speak a lie at every moment, at the drop of a hat. So the tendency is there to speak lie, to cheat. These tendencies are very deeply rooted. And so we all know it for ourselves. And so these tendencies are there. So we have to definitely try and overcome these tendencies and try to be truthful, try to be honest to ourselves. And as far as how much to speak, what to speak, depends on the person to whom we are speaking. It's not that we just speak everything to anyone and everyone. So we have to use our intelligence for that. But the essential principle is that we essentially have to be truthful and honest. And if we are not, we can cheat many people, we can fool many people. But ultimately, there's the Paramatma within the heart who knows what I'm speaking, what I'm doing, and then he will reciprocate accordingly. So that is the essential principle. One has to understand the principle.
Yes, Prabhuji. A question related to this only, Prabhuji. It was a very nice discussion. When we have to, while practicing devotional service, we have to be straightforward, because this is we have to be sincere. At the same time, when we are staying in, when we are in the association of devotees, and particularly in institutional setup, so there is in one sense, a kind of pressure also comes, that when we cannot exactly be what we are, something like means artificial, some kind of tendency comes to show ourselves different, so because of means we are staying inside. So now how to come out of this tendency? Because then naturally there's certain kind of duplicitous behavior. One means I may start practicing duplicitous and act in a duplicitous way. So how do I take care that to come out of this?
Okay, so my question is, what is the need? Whether we're in institution, no institution, whatever the situation.
For example,
speaking of an institution, so what is the need within an institution for duplicitous behavior?
Now, for example, now when it comes to like in a like for someone maybe acting in a managerial role, so now he has for the sake of service act in a little duplicitous way, giving a priority to somebody, So there's some kind of duplicity is involved. So giving priority to somebody not as compared to other person. So some kind of a duplicitous behavior creeps.
Yes.
So gets
So
in.
therefore, the essential principle, as somebody was asking that question about using diplomacy in Krishna's service. So yes, so ultimately, therefore, the bottom line is whatever one is doing, the bottom line is one has to ask this question: why am I doing this? Is it going to help Krishna's service? Is it going to somehow help the institution? What is the purpose? Is it something personal for my own benefit, for my own name and fame, or is it to help the organization? This is the singular question one has to ask oneself. What is my motive in doing this? So then one can, based upon that answer, then one can, if it is for the service of Krishna, service of the institution, then yes, then diplomacy can also be used in Krishna's service. So ultimately, everything depends on what's the goal. And of course, if when one has doubts, then one can always confirm with symbols. All right.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. So we will take a 15 minutes break now, and we will continue after 15 minutes. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna. Okay, so let's proceed ahead to text 34. So having established the supremacy of the Lord and the practice of pure devotional service, so now the Lord is, Prithu Maharaj is going on to say that how the Lord is giving everyone a chance to progress in devotional service, or everyone a chance to come towards Him, even by performing different sacrifices. So that's what he speaks in the next verse.
Hare Krishna. Your voice is not clear.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Is that okay?
Yes, Prabhuji.
Thank you. So text 34. Asavihane ka guno dhvara pritak vidha dravya guna kriyokti bhi sampadyate artha shayalinga nama bhir vishuddha vijnana gana swarupatah. The Supreme Personality of Godhead is transcendental and not contaminated by this material world. But although he is concentrated spirit soul without material variety, for the benefit of the conditioned soul, he nevertheless accepts different types of sacrifice performed with various material elements, rituals, mantras, and offered to the demigods under different names according to the interests and purposes of the performers. So the Supreme Lord, he is, of course, he is always gunatit. He is guna agunaha. He is never affected by the gunas. But still, he accepts various yajnas, different types, pritak vida, using different dravya, guna, kriya, uktibi. So using different things, so many people perform so many different sacrifices. But the Lord has allowed all this. So that is basically what is karma kand. He has allowed all this because there are different people in different modes. And for the gradual progress, then the Lord has given all these arrangements so that ultimately they can gradually get purified and ultimately they can come to Him. So that's the whole purpose of the karma kand. And that's what Prabhupada is describing in the purport also. That is at the end of the first paragraph. Generally, the karma kand ritualistic ceremonies are performed in the mode of passion. Yet the conditioned souls, both human beings and demigods, are obliged to perform these yajnas because without them, one cannot be happy at all. This is the whole subject matter in the 3rd chapter of the Gita from verses 10 to 16, where Krishna is speaking about karma kand. So, Srila Vishnu Thakur comments that these karma kand ritualistic ceremonies, although contaminated, contain touches of devotional service because whenever there is performance of any yajna, Lord Vishnu is given a central position. Therefore, further down he says, therefore, although such yajnas are superficially material activities, the results are transcendental. So, you may be aware of this famous, well-known analogy that is given in the scriptures. We find it in a purport in the 11th canto of the Bhagavatam. The example is given of a mother who wants to feed bitter medicine to the child. So how does the mother feed? In some sweet, in some sweet. So the child thinks it is sweet, but then he gets the medicine anyways. So similar, that's the purpose of karma kand. So people in general want sense gratification, conditioned souls. And so therefore, the karmakanda sacrifices and rituals are promising more sense gratification. So conditioned souls get attracted. But along with that, there is the medicine. That is the chanting of the names of Vishnu. And that is how the person gets purified even by performing these karmakanda rituals and sacrifices. And ultimately, the sacrifices are ultimately offered to Vishnu because Vishnu is the Yajnapati. And that is what Prabhupada writes further down the purport, quoting this verse, Brahmarpanam, Brahma Havir, Brahma Agnav, and all that. So he's quoting that verse to show that ultimately, if the verse is saying that ultimately in the performance of a sacrifice, if the goal is spiritual, then the result will also be spiritual. The gati will also be spiritual. Brahmeva tena gantavyam, Brahma karma samadhina. So if the purpose of performing the sacrifice is Brahman, that means has a spiritual purpose, then ultimately the goal also will be spiritual. And therefore, further on, after that, Prabhupada is writing, anything material or spiritual done for the satisfaction of the Supreme Lord is understood to be an actual yajna. And by performing such yajnas, one gets liberation from material bondage. The direct method, so that's an indirect method of getting liberation. The direct method of getting liberation from material bondage is devotional service, comprising the 9 following methods: Shravanam, Kirtanam, Vishnu. So I will just read a commentary on the verse. Though, of course, Srila Prabhupada has already quoted Vishnu Thakur in his purport, but still we'll read this. Okay, somebody can read from the screen, please.
Karma, by its very nature, is impure, material, and rajasic. But if it is offered to the Lord, it ultimately becomes Vishuddha Sattva, spiritual, by the minor portion of the bhakti within it. In 2 verses, Prithu teaches Bhakti Mishra Karma. Prithu points with his index finger at the sacrifice being prepared. This asau sacrifice, though it has many qualities in rajas, becomes without gunas, beyond the gunas in its final state, because of the power of bhakti present when the sacrifice is offered to the Lord. It becomes pure knowledge. It becomes endowed with the form of the bliss of Brahman, since karma matures finally into liberation through jnana. From the beginning, however, simply hearing and chanting the Lord's name are full of pure knowledge. They are devoid of the gunas from the beginning. Thus, they are in all ways superior to karma or the Lord Asau, by his very nature beyond the gunas, full of pure knowledge, and the path of karma become sacrifice endowed with many gunas.
Okay, so basically the point is that so one can perform sacrifice, which is karma. The karma kind of sacrifices, karma yoga. So all this is has tinges of rajasic and tamasic elements. But then when they are ultimately offered to Vishnu, then gradually the person he becomes purified. So by karma he gets jnana, and through jnana he can ultimately get liberation. So that is the indirect process, the step-by-step process. The direct process is to take to the path of devotional service. So Prithumar is explaining that the Lord is giving all facilities for the conditioned souls directly and indirectly to make progress. But then based upon how one approaches the Lord, then the Lord reciprocates accordingly. So Lord has given all facilities. You can choose any path: karma, jnana, yoga, bhakti, all paths are there. But then the Lord reciprocates according to the degree of surrender and how one approaches the Lord. That is what he describes in the next verse. Pradana kala shaya dharma sangrahe sharira esha pratipadya chetanam kriya phalatvena vibhur vibhavyate yatha nalo darushu tad gunatmakaha. The Supreme Personality of Godhead is all pervading, but he is also manifested in different types of bodies which arise from a combination of material nature, time, desires, and occupational duties. Thus, different types of consciousness develop, just as fire, which is always basically the same, blazes in different ways according to the shape and dimension of the firewood. So based upon the shape and dimension of the firewood, then different varieties, different shapes of fires will blaze. So similarly, based upon how one approaches the Supreme Lord is all pervading, but he is present in different types of bodies, and different types of bodies approach the Lord in different ways, and accordingly, the Lord will also reciprocate. So therefore, Prabhupada writes in the second paragraph, according to the development of consciousness, God realization is present in the human form of life. It is recommended, therefore, that one undergoes the different types of penances and austerities described by Karma Yoga, Jnana Yoga, Jnana Yoga, Bhakti Yoga. Like a staircase, yoga has different steps for reaching the topmost floor. And according to one's position upon the staircase, he is understood to be situated in Karma Yoga, Jnana Yoga, Jnana Yoga, or Bhakti Yoga. Of course, Bhakti Yoga is the topmost step on the staircase. So, yes. In other words, according to one's development in consciousness, one realizes a spiritual identity, and thus, when one's existential position is purified fully, he becomes situated in Brahmananda, which is ultimately unlimited. And then he talks about the Sankirtan moment, which is the easiest process. And therefore, he can further down, he says, Ye yathamam prapadyante tam sateva bhajamyaham. The Supreme Personality of God is realized according to the proportion of one's surrender. Full surrender, however, occurs when a man is perfectly in knowledge. So that is what basically saying. So yes, everyone can approach the Lord directly, indirectly, in different ways, but then the Lord reciprocates according to the degree of one's surrender. Okay, so I think so we can skip this commentary because we already discussed it. Okay, fine. So, and then finally, the next verse is the last verse of this section, where Prithu Maharaj is giving instructions to his citizens. So basically, he instructed his citizens on taking shelter of the Lord, performing pure devotional service, or if that is not possible, even indirect ways, but ultimately the Lord is going to reciprocate according to one's level of surrender. And so finally, he's concluding his instructions in the next verse. Aho mamami vitarantyanugraham Harim Gurum Yagyamujam Adishwaram Swadharma Yogena Yajanti Mamaka Nirantaram Shoni Tale Dridavrataha. The Supreme Personality of Godhead is the master and enjoyer of the results of all sacrifices, and he is the supreme spiritual master as well. All of you citizens on the surface of the globe who have a relationship with me and are worshipping him by dint of your occupational duties are bestowing your mercy upon me. Therefore, O my citizens, I thank you. So he's thanking his citizens that, okay, they have agreed. So Vishwanath Chakravarti describes, so after he gave all his instructions, so the citizens said, yes, we will definitely follow your instructions, we'll perform our occupational duties, and at the same time perform devotional service. So Prithu Maharaj is very happy with the response of the citizens, that is thanking them, because as you already described, because when the citizens perform their duties, then both get the benefit. Citizens also get benefit, king also gets benefit. So therefore, he is thanking them. Yes. Okay, so as Prabhupada writes, Maharaj Prithu's advice to citizens to take to devotional service is now concluded in two ways. He has repeatedly advised persons who are neophytes to engage themselves in devotional service according to the capacities of the different orders of social and spiritual life. But here he specifically thanks those who already engaged in such devotional service to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is actually the enjoyer of all sacrificial ceremonies and who is also the Supreme Teacher's Antaryami. So they have agreed to perform devotional service, therefore he is thanking them. Okay, so now, having concluded that devotional service is the goal of human life, and that is what is going to lead to perfection. So now, in the next section of this chapter, from 37 to 44, so in this section, he is specifically describing the glories of Brahmanas and Vaishnavas, so that by understanding those glories of Brahmanas and Vaishnavas, one can become more fixed in one's practice of devotional service. Because unless one takes shelter and glorifies and serves the Brahmanas and Vaishnavas, one cannot please the Supreme Lord, and one cannot make advancement on the devotional path. So therefore, he's giving all these glories of Brahmanas and Vaishnavas so that one can serve the Brahmanas and Vaishnavas and thus become more fixed in the practice of devotional service. So many of these points are actually covered by the Lord himself when he speaks to the four Kumaras and Jay and Vijay in the third canto of the Bhagavatam. So I'm sure that that has already been covered. And so most of these points are actually covered over there. So we will first of all read all the translations of these verses, and then we will try to go through some important points. Okay, so So therefore, somebody can just read all the translations from 37 to 44.
The Brahmanas and Vaishnavas are personally glorified by their characteristic powers of tolerance, penance, knowledge, and education. By dint of all these spiritual assets, Vaishnavas are more powerful than royalty. It is therefore advised that the princely order not exhibit its material prowess before these two communities and should avoid offending them. The Supreme Personality of Godhead, the ancient eternal Godhead, who is foremost among all great personalities, obtained the opulence of his staunch reputation, which purifies the entire universe by worshipping the lotus feet of those Brahmanas and Vaishnavas. The Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is everlastingly independent and who exists in everyone's heart, is very pleased with those who follow in his footsteps and engage without reservation in the service of the descendants of Brahmanas and Vaishnavas, for he is always dear to Brahmanas and Vaishnavas, and they are always dear to him. By regular service to the Brahmanas and Vaishnavas, one can clear the dirt from his heart and thus enjoy supreme peace and liberation from material attachment and be satisfied. In this world, there is no fruitive activity superior to serving the Brahmana class, for this can bring pleasure to the demigods for whom the many sacrifices are recommended. Although the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Ananta, eats through the fire sacrifices offered in the names of the different demigods, he does not take as much pleasure in eating through fire as he does in accepting offerings through the mouths of learned sages and devotees. For them, he does not leave the association of devotees. In Brahmanical culture, a Brahmana's transcendental position is eternally maintained because the injunctions of the Vedas are accepted with faith, austerity, scriptural conclusions, full sense and mind control, and meditation. In this way, the real goal of life is illuminated just as one's face is fully reflected in a clear mirror. O respectable personalities present here, I beg the blessings of all of you that I may perpetually carry on my crown on the dust of the lotus feet of such Brahmanas and Vaishnavas until the end of my life. He who can carry such dust on his head is very soon relieved of all the reactions which arise from sinful life, and eventually he develops all good and desirable qualities. Whoever acquires the Brahmanical qualifications, whose only wealth is good behavior, who is grateful, and who takes shelter of experienced person, gets all the opulence of the world. I therefore wish that the Supreme Personality of Godhead and his associates be pleased with the Brahmana class, with the cows, and with me.
Yes. So these are instructions which Prithu Maharaj is giving to his citizens, specifically regarding the glories of Brahmanas and Vaishnavas and the results of serving the Brahmanas and Vaishnavas who are very dear to the Lord. So the ultimate purpose of all this description is so that one becomes more fixed in the practices of devotional service. So in verse number 37, first of all, he is describing the qualities of the Brahmanas and Vaishnavas. So,
Prabhuji, your voice is not clear. We are not able to. Yeah.
Okay, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. I think it's a little bit of change of position may help. All right?
Yes, Prabhuji.
Okay. So first of all, he is describing the qualities of Brahmanas and Vaishnavas. And as we well know from the Bhagavad Gita also, the qualities of Brahmanas, Shamo, Dhamma, Tapa, Shaucham, Arjavam, and all that. So similar qualities is mentioning over here also. And so therefore, Prithu Maharaj says that because of these qualities, because of these qualifications, the Brahmanas are extremely powerful. And therefore, he says that actually the royalty, the kings should not have any control over them because they're not going to misuse. They're not going to misuse their power. They're not going to misuse anything. So therefore, they can be given full freedom. And so therefore, we find that to the degree one does not misuse the freedom, to that degree, one gets more freedom. And therefore, the Brahmanas and Vaishnavas, they never misuse the freedom. So therefore, Prithu Maharaj is saying, there's no need for the Kshatriyas, the royalty, to exert control over them and to decide what they're supposed to do, not supposed to do, because they know what they're supposed to do. And so here he is describing the qualities. Here in the purport, Srila Prabhupada also speaks about Vaishnava Prad. So, yes, Prabhupada begins the purport by saying, Prithu Maharaj has explained in the previous verse the importance of devotional service for both the rulers and the citizens of the state. Now he explains how one can be steadily fixed in devotional service. Okay, so one can be steadily fixed in devotional service by giving importance to the Brahmanas and the Vaishnavas, by serving them. And so that is how one can become fixed. And that is why he's describing all this. And so therefore one should avoid offending the Brahmanas and Vaishnavas. And therefore Srila Prabhupada in the purport is describing again Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's instructions to Rupa Goswami about Vaishnava Prad. So most of us are familiar with the subject matter, so we're not discussing that. And then in the next paragraph, he's defining who's a Brahmana, who's a Vaishnav. When a person understands his pure identity, Brahma Janati, he immediately becomes a Brahmana. And when a Brahmana who rises to the platform of personal understanding of the Supreme Godhead, he becomes a Vaishnava. In between the sentences, in the Brahmana stage, one's understanding of the absolute truth is mainly based on the impersonal view. So a Brahmana, he knows Brahman, and his understanding of the Supreme Brahman may be mostly impersonal. But then when one gets the personal understanding, then he becomes a Vaishnava. And he has all these qualities. Okay, and in text 38, he's describing how the Supreme Lord also thinks that he has some good qualities because of his service to the Brahmanas and the Vaishnavas. And so Srila Prabhupada in the purport is describing how the Supreme Lord also takes great pleasure in serving the Brahmanas and Vaishnavas. And we have the various examples Prabhupada is giving of how the Lord, he welcomed and worshipped Narad Muni, Sudama Vipra. So we see that how the Lord himself takes a great pleasure in serving the Brahmanas and Vaishnavas. Also gives examples of the Lord respecting Yudhishthira Maharaj. And therefore, in the next verse, he says that if the Supreme Lord shows so much respect to Brahmanas and Vaishnavas, then what we are supposed to do? Follow in his footsteps. And that is what he's saying in the next verse. So we are supposed to follow in the footsteps of the Supreme Lord. And therefore, Prabhupada is quoting Yasya Prasadat, Bhagavad Prasada, Yasya Prasadat. Therefore, Prabhupada ends that purport by saying, Prithu Maharaj advised his citizens to follow the exemplary behavior of the Lord himself and thus engage in the service of the Brahmanas and Vaishnavas. Now, in the next verse is describing what is the result of such regular service to the Brahmanas and Vaishnavas. So then he describes that the result is one can clear the dirt from his heart. One can become purified, and then one can be prasidataha. One can be satisfied, one can be peaceful because of the purification. So when one is purified of the effects of rajas and tamas. So because of rajas and tamas, there is kama, lobha, and all these anarthas, then one cannot be peaceful because one is always hankering for more and more and more. Then one cannot be peaceful. But when one becomes purified and one becomes free from the effects of rajas and tamas, one is situated in sattva, then one can be peaceful. Again, Prabhupada is quoting Narottam Das Thakur, Tandire Charan Sevi Bhakta Sanevas, Janme Janme Hoi E Abhilash. Also, he's quoting the example of Narad Muni, how Narad boy in his previous life served the Bhaktivedantas, and that's how he became purified and achieved significant. And then here in the next verse is describing how the Lord is more pleased when the Brahmanas and the Vaishnavas are fed, he eats to the mouth of the Brahmanas and Vaishnavas and is more pleased in doing that than eating through the fire sacrifice. Yajna. And here Prabhupada is giving an example of Advaita Acharya offering the Shraddha Patra to Haridas Thakur. And in the next verse, he's describing that why the Brahmanas are glorified and why their position is maintained because of the various qualities that they exhibit. Therefore, Prabhupada writes in the purport, a Brahmana must be fully conversant with the Vedic conclusion. So that's how he must know the Vedas, the Vedic conclusion, especially Vedas sarver ahame vedyo, and that's how then he is able to practice devotional service and be on that platform. In the next paragraph, Prabhupada writes, a perfect Vaishnava or Krishna conscious person is always in this transcendental position because he speaks according to Krishna and his representative. Because Vaishnavas speak exactly according to the tune of Krishna, whatever they say is free from these 4 defects. So when Prabhupada was asked, are you perfect? Prabhupada said, I'm not perfect, but what I'm speaking is perfect because it is coming from the perfect source. So that is something which is very important as Vaishnavas. And then Prabhupada is also speaking about this word Mangala, the word auspicious, and how we can maintain that Mangala or auspicious atmosphere is by maintaining the Brahmanical culture. And how we can maintain the Brahmanical culture, Prabhupada is describing by following the regulative principles, chanting 16 rounds of the Hare Krishna mantra and chanting Gayatri 3 times. In this way, one can keep his Brahmanical culture and spiritual strength intact. By following these principles of devotional service strictly, chanting 24 hours a day, the Mahamantra Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare, one makes positive progress in spiritual life and ultimately becomes completely fit to see the Supreme Personality of Godhead face to face. And therefore, Prithu Maharaj, he is Shaktivesh avatar, but is desiring to have the dust of the lotus feet of the Brahmanas and Vaishnavas on his crown. So he's begging blessings from all the citizens so that he can always have the dust of the Brahmanas and Vaishnavas on his head. And thus he can be relieved of all the reactions from sinful lives. Of course, he's speaking this out of humility. There's no question of sinful life for Prithu Maharaj, but then he's setting an example and he's speaking out of humility. And then Prabhupada is also quoting Prahlad Maharaj, Naisham Matistava Durukramangrim. Unless one takes the dust of the lotus feet of a pure Vaishnava on one's head, one cannot understand what the Supreme Personality of Godhead is. And unless one knows the Supreme Personality of Godhead, one's life remains imperfect. So this is a very important point, that unless one gets the mercy of the pure devotee, it is not possible for one to understand the Supreme Lord. Srila Prabhupada elaborately describes this in the Bhagavad Gita also, in the purport 7.24. Yes, Avyaktam Vyaktim Apannam. So in that purport, Srila Prabhupada describes how the understanding of the Supreme Lord is very rare and very difficult, quoting from the Brahma Samhita Pantastu Koti Shatavatsara Sampragamyo. So quoting that verse, Srila Prabhupada is explaining how even the greatest of the Munis, they cannot understand. And so what is required to get an understanding of the Supreme Lord is Athapita Deva Padambujadvaya Prasad Leshanugrihita Evahi Janati Tattvam Bhagavan Mahimno. So what is required is that Prasad Leshan, one has to receive a trace, at least a trace of the mercy of the Supreme Lord, which obviously comes through the Vaishnavas, through the spiritual master. And so therefore, unless one gets that mercy, it is not possible for one to understand. Again, Prabhupada also describes similar points in Bhagavad Gita 6.8 purport. So there, where he's describing simply bookish knowledge without realization is useless. So if one wants realization, then it has to be by the grace of Guru and Krishna. And so therefore one has to attract the grace of Guru and Krishna by serving them then only by their mercy it is possible to understand something about the Supreme Lord. Otherwise, of course, full understanding is very difficult. Even Krishna does not understand completely about himself. So therefore, by the grace, one can get some understanding about the Supreme Lord. So therefore, all the Shastras focus a lot on attracting the grace of Guru and Krishna. We know that famous pastime of Kanchipurna and Sripad Ramacharya. So Sripad Ramacharya, he asked Kanchipurna, because he would speak to Vadraj, he asked him, so please ask the Lord, when will I go back to Vaikuntha? And so Kanchipurna asks, and then the Lord says, yes, he will definitely go back in this lifetime. And then Kanchipurna asks about himself, will I go? And then the Lord says, no, you will not go, because you have not served a Vaishnava. And immediately Kanchipurna leaves the Chamara there and he goes to serve Vaishnava. And then he goes and serves Mahaprabhu. So, but the point is that yes, unless one serves the Vaishnavas, it is not possible for one to attract the mercy and understand the Supreme Lord. So, therefore, we find Prithu Maharaj also so eager to take the dust of the lotus feet of the Vaishnavas. So Prabhupada concludes the purport by saying, in other words, if a liberal king like Prithu Maharaj does not follow the instructions of Brahmanas and Vaishnavas, or does not follow the Brahmanical culture, he is simply a burden on the state. So the crown becomes a burden if one does not follow the Brahmanas and the Vaishnavas. And so finally, he is concluding that whoever acquires the Brahmanical qualifications. So here he is saying, what is real dhana? What is real dhan? So he says Shila Dhanam. The real dhan is Shila. Shila means good behavior. That is the real dhan. And so three things he's saying over here. So the Brahmanical qualifications are the Shila Dhan, that is good behavior. Kritagyam, one who is grateful. And the third thing is Vriddha Ashrayam, one who takes shelter of the learned. So these are so if one has these qualifications, then the result will be one can get all sampada, all the opulences one can get. So these are three important Brahmanical qualifications: Shiladhan, Kritagya, and Vriddhashrayam. So we already have discussed quite elaborately on good behavior. And anyway, it just reminds me of, again, this beautiful quote from Bhagavad Gita 8.28 purport. Prabhupada writes, the study of the Vedas is not simply meant for the recreation of armchair speculators, but for the formation of character. So that is the purpose of the study of the Vedas. The study of the scriptures is ultimately for the formation of character. And so sufficient emphasis is there on that. And being grateful for what one has received. That is an important Brahmanical qualification. Again, you may have studied in the third canto, there as Uddhava is remembering the various pastimes of the Lord, there he remembers how he favors Sandipani Muni by bringing back his dead son. And in that purport, Srila Prabhupada writes that how even the Supreme Lord is not an ingrate to his devotees. He's not ungrateful. Even the Supreme Lord, through his behavior, shows that how he is also grateful. I recently heard an interesting story here. The Bhagavatam speaker was quoting Gaur Krishna Maharaj, and it seems Maharaj tells the story about gratitude. So it seems there was a Shwapacha, dog eater, in a forest in some place. So he was cooking the meat of a dog. And one person, he walks by that, the Shwapacha who's cooking the dog meat. And so as soon as that person, he passes by, the person who's cooking the meat, he takes a cloth and covers the meat. So then behind him, there was another saintly person following. So the saintly person asked this Shwapacha, why did you cover the meat when this person walked by? So the man replies, the Shwapach replies, because this person is an ungrateful person. So therefore, if this person sees what I'm cooking, it will become contaminated. So therefore I covered it. So the saintly person says, I asked him, you're cooking dog meat. What is there? Is there anything good in that? Is there anything auspicious? Is there anything that is going to be contaminated? It is already fully contaminated. So the Shwapach replies, I don't know what is pure, impure. I don't know all this. But what I understand is this man is ungrateful. So if he happens to see, then it is going to get contaminated. So anyway, so this story, it seems, was told by God Krishna Maharaj to illustrate the point that how somebody who's ungrateful, then his very glance at something makes everything inauspicious. So it just shows that the importance of gratitude, and we hear this many times, and therefore it is very important that we cultivate this quality of gratitude and understand that how the Lord, especially for us as devotees, as brahmacharis, how all devotees within ISKCON, how we are so much floating, literally submerged in the Lord's mercy. So many facilities have been given to us for practicing devotional service. So, and definitely there are enough reasons for us to be so grateful for what we have been given. And so that quality of gratitude is very important, because when that quality of gratitude is there, then we will also show that gratitude by unconditional service, by using our full capacity to serve, because what we have received is so much. And in the next chapter, we will see, of course, that's actually Prithu Maharaj, he tells Sanat Kumar that actually one can never repay the debt to the spiritual master for what one has received. And so we have received so much from Srila Prabhupada and his representatives, so much, unlimited mercy. And so being grateful is something which is extremely important. Prabhupada mentions about that in his purport also. Prabhupada says, everyone should, gratitude. Okay, before that, I'll read this entire paragraph. A devotee acquires all the good qualities of the demigods. He is Gunayanam, the reservoir of all good qualities. His only asset is good behavior, and he is grateful. Gratitude for the mercy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead is one of the qualities of Brahmanas and Vaishnavas. Everyone should feel grateful to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, because he's maintaining all living entities and supplying all their necessities. The Supreme One is supplying all necessities. The living entity who is therefore grateful to the Supreme Personality of Godhead is certainly qualified with good characteristics. Okay, so that's an important quality. And then the next is Vridhashrayam. So Vridha means one who's advanced in knowledge. Talks about two kinds of old men. So Vridhashrayam, a person who takes shelter of a superior person who is advanced in knowledge, can acquire all the good qualities of Brahmana and be trained in good behavior. When one actually attains good qualities, becomes grateful for the mercy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and takes shelter of a bona fide spiritual master, he is endowed with all opulence. Such a person is a Brahmana or Vaishnava. Therefore, Prithu Maharaj invokes the blessings and mercy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead with his associates, devotees, Vaishnavas, Brahmanas, and cows. So in this way, Prithu Maharaj gives instructions to his citizens, and then the citizens are very happy, and they respond to what he has said. So the last section of the chapter is how the citizens, they respond to Prithu Maharaj's instructions. So somebody can read the rest of the translations. skip.
The great sage Maitreya said, after hearing King Prithu speak so nicely, all the demigods and the denizens of Pitriloka, the Brahmanas and the saintly persons present at the meeting congratulated him by expressing their goodwill. They all declared that the Vedic conclusion that one can conquer the heavenly planets by the action of a putra or son was fulfilled. For the most sinful Vena, who had been killed by the curse of the Brahmanas, was now delivered from the darkest region of hellish life by his son Maharaj Prithu. Similarly, Hiranyakashipu, who by dint of his sinful activities always defied the supremacy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, entered into the darkest region of hellish life. But by the grace of his great son Prahlad Maharaj, he also was delivered and went back home, back to Godhead. All the saintly Brahmanas thus addressed Prithu Maharaj, O best of the warriors, O father of this globe, may you be blessed with a long life, for you have great devotion to the infallible Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is the master of all universe. The audience continued, Dear King Prithu, your reputation is the purest of all, for you are preaching the glories of the most glorified of all, the Supreme Personality of a Godhead, the Lord of the Brahmanas. Since, due to our great fortune, we have you as our master, we think that we are living directly under the agency of the Lord. Our dear Lord, it is your occupational duty to rule over your citizens. That is not a very wonderful task for a personality like you, who are so affectionate in seeing to the interests of the citizens, because you are full of mercy. That is the greatness of your character. The citizens continue. Today you have opened our eyes and revealed how to cross to the other side of the ocean of darkness. By our past deeds and by the arrangement of the superior authority, we are entangled in a network of fruitive activities and have lost sight of the destination of life. Thus, we have been wandering within the universe. Dear Lord, you are situated in your pure existential position of goodness. Therefore, you are the perfect representative of the Supreme Lord. You are glorified by your own prowess, and thus you are maintaining the entire world by introducing Brahmanical culture and protecting everyone in your line of duty as a Kshatriya.
Yes, thus Anabhaktan purports of the 4th canto, 21st chapter, Srimad Bhagavatam, entitled Instructions from Maharaj Prithu. So in this way, the citizens are very happy with the wonderful instructions which Prithu Maharaj has given, and they are glorifying Prithu Maharaj for his wonderful rule, for his wonderful qualities, and they're feeling grateful that we have a master like you. And so they are saying that by having a master like you, we are feeling as if we are under the direct protection of the Lord himself. In the purport to text 49, Srila Prabhupada writes at the end that how a king or a leader of society can become the representative of the Supreme Personality of Godhead is also indicated in this verse by the statement that because Prithu Maharaj was preaching the supremacy and the glories of the Supreme Personality of Godhead Vishnu, he was therefore a proper representative of the Lords. So if one is preaching and practicing according to the instructions of the Lord, then that's how one becomes a proper representative of the Lord. Yes. Okay, we'll just read the last few lines of the last purport. Prithu Maharaj is addressed here as Vibridha Sattva, or one who is situated in a transcendental position. But Maharaj Prithu, although situated in the transcendental position of a pure devotee, came down to the position of a Brahmana and Kshatriya for the benefit of human society, and thus give protection to the entire world by his personal prowess. Although he was king, a Kshatriya, because he was a Vaishnava, he was also a Brahmana. As a Brahmana, he could give protection, he could give proper instructions to citizens, and as a Kshatriya, he could rightly give protection to all of them. Thus, the citizens of Maharaj Pitu were protected in all respects by the perfect king. Any questions on this chapter?
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji.
Yes.
Can you please show the slide which was just displayed?
Okay, just a second. This one?
Yes. The first point where it's mentioned that Kshatriyas should never exert their power over Brahmanas and Vaishnavas. And Srila Prabhupada very elaborately discussed in that purport about Vaishnava Aparad and all those things.
Correct.
So while we are serving in a position where we are dealing with Vaishnavas, what should be our role and how we should be so that we don't, exert power, at the same time the service has also to be done?
Yes, wonderful question. My understanding is that if we have the proper service attitude, that just like we saw Prithu Maharaj, right in the beginning, Prithu Maharaj, as he begins giving instructions to the citizens, the first thing he says is, by the grace of the Lord, I have been put in this position. So if one has that attitude that by the grace of the Lord, I've been put in this position, I'm simply a representative of the Lord, I'm an instrument of the Lord, then one will always be in the mood of rendering service. So it's not that one is even if one is a leader, one is not in the mood that I'm someone superior, but one will always remain in the mood of a servant, which is our actual position, whatever may be the service, but actually one is simply a servant. So one is always in the mood of a servant, then in whatever way I need to serve, just like Prithu Maharaj, being the king, he's serving by giving instructions to the citizens. And of course, he also serves, as we saw in the previous chapters, he was also chastising Mother Earth, and he was doing so many other things, but everything was in the mood of a service. So if we are in that mood of a servant, then one will always do things in a way that will ultimately help enhance the service. And then one will always be protected from offenses and any other misbehavior. So I think so the ultimate bottom line is the right attitude in which one accepts the service. So then even though one may be guiding other Vaishnavas or helping them in their service, so if the mood is correct, then one will always be in safe. That's my answer. Somebody wants to add? Is it okay, Shripal Math?
Yes, Prabhu. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Vrindan Priyamati.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. Prabhuji, in verse 37, the qualification or the difference between Brahmana and Vaishnava is given. So there the sentence is given that a Vaishnava is supposed to be a Brahmana already, but a Brahmana may not be a pure Vaishnava. So here Vaishnava is supposed to be Brahmana means, is it by qualification or how is it?
Yes. So by qualifications, yes. So he should definitely have all the Brahmanical qualifications. And then over and above that, as far as realization of the Supreme Lord is concerned, the Brahmana may have an incomplete realization of the impersonal Brahman, but the Vaishnava, he has proper understanding of the Bhagwan aspect. So in that sense, the Vaishnava is already a Brahmana, but the Brahmana may not be a Vaishnava because the Brahmana doesn't have a proper understanding, may not have the complete understanding of the absolute truth. So that's how. All right. Any other question? Okay, we are proceeding on to chapter 22. Prithu Maharaj's meeting with the four Kumaras.
One thing about this Brahmana and Vaishnava. So Prabhupada in that purport mentions that one is fully engaged in the transcendental loving service of the Lord, he becomes a Vaishnava.
Correct.
And he also says that the Vaishnava has already got the qualifications of a Brahmana.
Right.
So when we talk about the Brahmanical qualifications, Shama, Dama, Tapa, Shocham. So as a practicing devotee, may not have all those Brahmanical qualities manifest fully. May be trying to work on that.
Correct.
So the gradation is given like this, that the Brahmana and then the Vaishnava is above that. But actually we are dealing with a situation where one is trying to be a Vaishnava and one is trying to be a Brahmana both.
Correct.
And so is Prithu Maharaj referring to a Vaishnava who already transcended the modes and thus he's in that like transcendental loving service, or someone who is like Prabhupada gives a definition of pure devotee in other way also, where he says that a devotee who is sincerely trying to walk on the journey of pure devotion service. So how, because surely qualities of this kind, like Brahmana has certain qualities that may still take time. Even after getting Brahmana Diksha also it takes time to so it's not like Brahmana Diksha also is the sign of being a Brahmana and a Vaishnava. So, so what is the...
Yeah, so therefore, Prabhupada in one initiation lecture, I suppose, or in general, in any case, so when Prabhupada is saying, so we are avoiding the second initiation, Brahmana initiation, so that we develop the Brahmanical qualities. So it is an opportunity to develop the Brahmanical qualities. In another lecture, Prabhupada also says, so Vaishnava devotee is something very high. We are only trying to be a devotee, apprentice devotee. And Prabhupada uses that word, apprentice. So we are still practicing. That is one point. Now, another point is that the important difference is the difference in realization of the absolute truth. So as far as we are concerned, we definitely may not be fully realized, but at least we have the proper understanding that when we speak of the absolute truth, then we are referring to Bhagavan. So we have that complete understanding of the absolute truth. And so from that point of view, we can definitely say that, yes, we are trying to be Vaishnavas. And so from that perspective of realization, then yes, one is definitely to be considered as a Vaishnava, even though he may not have all the Brahmanical qualities. And so in that context, the reference is, we can see Prahlad Maharaj's Prayers, 7th Canto, 9th chapter. If I'm not mistaken, this is verse number 9, where Prahlad Maharaj is saying that, so even if somebody is a Brahmana with all the 12 qualities of the Brahmana, but if he is not a Vaishnava, then he cannot even deliver himself, what to speak of delivering others. But on the other hand, somebody is born in Shwapach family, but if he is a Vaishnava, then he can deliver himself in this family. So therefore, the essential difference is the difference in realization. That makes the essential difference. That's my understanding. Does that help, Anthony Pro?
Yes, Prajit, I mean, thank you, Prajit. Those points are good. Want to also know that, like when you say, when we say that someone has not attained the Brahmanical qualification, but is higher than a Brahmana, so the understanding is higher than the Brahmana in one way, but the actions will be lower than a Brahmana in some sense, in some actions. So usually people will see those actions and say that you're not conforming to being respected in that way, no? So like here, when Prithu Maharaj is saying that we should not exercise control, so a person who has the right understanding of the absolute truth in the conception, but his sadachar doesn't match, then a person who is on the Kshatriya role will have to exercise control.
Yes.
So he is referring to Vaishnava. Is he not referring to a Vaishnava who's actually realized on that, and thus he is not actually being governed by the modes, and thus that Vaishnava is qualified to be not be governed by a Kshatriya actually?
Yes, yes, that is correct. So when Prithu Maharaj is talking about Brahmanas and Vaishnavas, he's talking with that full understanding and the fact that the Vaishnava has all the Brahmanical qualities, and then he's actually a Vaishnava. So yes, it's all there as far as Prithu Maharaj is concerned. But as far as the Vaishnavas or the devotees who are practicing devotees are concerned, then again, Bhaktivinoda Thakur makes the point clear about the Swarup Lakshana and Tatastha Lakshana of Vaishnava. And so the Swarup Lakshana is Krishna Eka Sharanam. And so he very clearly says that when the Swarup Lakshana is there, then he is to be considered a sadhu, he is to be considered a devotee. So, and the Tatastha Lakshana will gradually develop. So, therefore, that is the understanding that when the Swarup Lakshana is there, Krishna Eka Sharanam, he has proper understanding that Krishna is Supreme Personality of Godhead, I need to take full shelter. And then the other qualities will gradually develop.
So in Vedic times, Puruji, how a devotee who is in the, how a Prithu Maharaj kind of personality who is in the Kshatriya role, trying to see that everyone follows his Varna and Ashrama, how he would see the situation if a Brahmana disgressed from his conduct? What he would do with him? Would he tell him the right code of conduct, or if he's going wrong, like if he misuses his position? So what is the right code of conduct for that Kshatriya?
So you're basically asking how would a Kshatriya deal with a Brahmana who is not properly following his dharma? So
he's a Vaishnava, he's a Brahmana, whatever, because from the point of view of status, he is a Brahmana. From the point of view of conduct, he is not living by the principle which the Brahmana or the Vaishnava should live by. So when Prithu Maharaj says it by internal qualification, by the qualification is there, then it is automatically understood that he is actually above the modes.
Correct.
But if he is not living by the conduct, then is the Kshatriya still putting a blind eye, feeling that this is not my adhikar?
Yes, but we are seeing examples. We are seeing examples of Ashwatthama. So he is a Brahmana, but his action is not like a Brahmana. So therefore, he has been called as a Brahma Bandhu. And so then he is being subjected to action he's subjected to disciplinary action by the Kshatriyas. Krishna is ordering Arjuna, you have to take appropriate action. So, therefore, that is what Prithu Maharaj is saying. So Prithu Maharaj is saying that one of the duties of the kings, this is also explained in other places, maybe in the first canto. So the duty of the king is to see that, Prabhupada speaks in his lectures also, that all the people are properly following their Varna and Ashram. They are properly following the duties. So if somebody is not properly following, then it is the duty of the Kshatriya to bring him on the right path. But then obviously here, when Prithu Maharaj is speaking about Brahmanas and Vaishnavas and Kshatriya not having control, it refers to those who are on the highest pure platform. And so therefore, their conduct will obviously be in accordance to dharma. So then there is no need. But when the Brahmanas or anyone is not properly following the conduct that is expected of them, and it is the duty of the Kshatriyas to bring them on the right path.
Thank you.
Prabhuji, then in this connection, how we understand this verse spoken by Krishna, Apichet Suduracharo Bhajate Mam Ananya Bhak, Sadhureva Samantavya, that he is still to be considered as sadhu, even if his sadachar is not proper.
Okay, so now you are opening a whole new discussion.
No, my point was again on the same aspect only, that Kshatriyas, whether they would punish the Brahmanas and Vaishnavas or not for their misconduct. So based on that only, I'm just
Yes.
referring this
So
verse.
definitely that is the duty of Kshatriyas, to see that everyone is properly following. If somebody is not properly following, then the necessary action definitely would be taken. There's no doubt about that. Now, talking about this verse of Apichet Suduracharo, which Krishna is speaking of in the Bhagavad Gita. Now, there are a few important points, both if you read Srila Prabhupada's commentary and Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur's commentary, then there are a few important points in regards to this. One thing is, in the entire purport to the verse, Prabhupada uses the word accidental 7 times to indicate that it only refers to an accidental performance of a blunder. Sudurachar, extremely abominable activity. It only refers to an accidental, not a pre-planned one. That is the first point. Second point is that, okay, then what is the response to that performance of the wrong activity? The acharyas explain that when one who has accidentally performed the wrong activity, he sincerely repents for the activity. He does not justify it. He repents for it. How does he repent? He says, for the wrong activity I have done, I am ready to go to hell for it. That is a sincere repentance. He is ready to be punished for the wrong activity. He doesn't justify it. He doesn't say, I don't want punishment. He is ready to even go to hell for the wrong activity. That is his repentance. He's ready to accept punishment. But his splendid resolution is, at any cost, I will never give up the lotus feet of the Lord. That is the meaning of apiche bhajate mam ananya bhak. At any cost, he is never ready. He is never going to give up the lotus feet of the Lord. That is his determination. Samyak vyavasito hi saha. His determination is, at any cost, he will never give up the devotional service. And because he never gives up the devotional service, the purification automatically takes place. And that is what Krishna is explaining in the next verse. Kshipram bhavati dharmatma shashva shanti nivachati. So because of that sincerity, his sincerity is his determination never to give up devotional service, his repentance, that is his sincerity. And of course, the first thing is, in the first place, the mistake itself was accidental due to the force of, as Prabhupada explains in the purport, the war against Maya, then somebody can get injured. So that may happen, but it was not pre-planned, accidental. Then, and so all these factors are taken into account. Then Krishna says, Sadhurevasa.
Then can we reconcile this as that when king like Prithu Maharaj or anybody who would see somebody not following their dharma but is sincere was forgiven, and others who are imposters or trying to show off something, and they were given due punishment?
Correct. That's right.
Do we have any example for this?
Okay, so one example, of course, we just said is Ashwatthama, who was definitely a Brahmabandhu. And as far as somebody who is has made a mistake and but is sincere, at least I cannot recollect any example right on the spot. If somebody,
I just recollected one example. There was this story that one king was awarding punishment, and he saw that the person was Brahmana, so he just spoke in front of all assembly that how could you do such activity, and that itself was his punishment. And for Kshatriya, then there was a different. Then for Vaishya, there was some financial.
Yes, the way of punishment is different according to the different varnas. Yes, for a Brahmana, simply some strong words are sufficient. That is the type of punishment that is awarded. But then the exact application of apichet suduracharo for a sincere Brahmana or a sincere devotee, immediately I cannot think of any Shastric example. Of course, we have examples from Prabhupada's life, but from Shastras, I cannot think. Anybody can think of any other example in this connection for apichet suduracharo? any case, the principle. So anyway, we'll try to find it. Gaulirapur, if you know something, you can let us know.
I don't remember anything now. If I get to know it.
Yes, yes. Thank you so much. Okay, fine. So we are proceeding on to the 22nd chapter. So these are the sections of the chapter. So the first 16 verses are Prithu receives the 4 Kumaras. And yes?
Prabhuji, you spoke about Apichesu Duracharya, and you were speaking about, I can just remember about Prabhupada's life. So what was that?
No, I was saying that we do have examples from Prabhupada's pastimes, how Prabhupada, seeing the sincerity of a devotee, would be forgiving, and he would not take action and all that. So we have examples from Prabhupada's life, I was saying, but I don't remember any Shastric example. That was what I was saying.
Can we take example of Dhaumya Rishi?
Who's that?
Dhaumya Rishi. Once he was going in the field and he saw a mango, but it belonged to the king. So he ate the mangoes. So then he thought that without asking the king, I have eaten the mango, so I'll cut my hand. So he cuts his hands, but then when he goes into a river, he gets back something like that.
And I don't know. So anyway, so we'll proceed ahead now with chapter 22, Prithu Maharaj's meeting with the 4 Kumaras. So the first 16 verses are describing how the 4 Kumaras arrive, and Prithu Maharaj is so wonderfully receiving them and placing his inquiries. Okay, so text 1. The great sage Maitreya said, while the citizens were thus praying to the most powerful King Prithu, the 4 Kumaras, who were as bright as the sun, arrived on the spot. And if you remember, Lord Vishnu had already predicted that very soon he would be having darshan of these great personalities, the 4 Kumaras. Seeing the glowing effulgence of the 4 Kumaras, the masters of all mystic power, the king and his associates could recognize them as they descended from the sky. Okay, so they were fully effulgent. And text 3, seeing the 4 Kumaras, Prithu Maharaj was greatly anxious to receive them. Therefore, the king, with all his officers, very hastily got up, as anxiously as a conditioned soul whose senses are immediately attracted by the modes of material nature. Okay, so just as the senses get spontaneously attracted to the sense objects, so similarly, Prithu Maharaj and all his officers and everyone, they were spontaneously attracted to the 4 Kumaras, and they immediately got up to offer respect. Prabhupada makes a point in the purport. He says that Prithu Maharaj, in the same way, that means how one gets attracted to the sense objects, could not restrain himself from receiving the 4 Kumaras, who were bright by dint of their spiritual progress. And thus, not only he himself, but also his officers and associates all received the 4 Kumaras. It's that birds of a feather flock together. In this world, everyone is attracted by a person of the same category. There's an interesting commentary by Vishwanath Thakur on the verse. Okay, please read.
An analogy is given to illustrate Prithu standing up. Prithu rose up as if to regain his life airs, which had left his body on seeing the effulgence of the Kumaras. Smriti says, Urdhvam pranahi utkramantra yunta stavara agate prati utthana bhavi tabhyam punastam patipadyata. When elders approach, the life airs of the young move upwards out of the body. By standing up in respect and greeting the elders, the life airs return to the body. Mahabharata.
Okay, so very interesting. So that is the reason why there is this etiquette that when elders come, then one stands up, one offers respect. So there is what you can say, not only just a philosophical understanding, but there is also a physiological understanding. So how when the elder comes and the life heirs move up, so if one wants the life heirs to return back, then one needs to stand up. So quite an interesting point. So therefore, there are all these etiquettes. So these etiquettes have great meaning. It's not just a ritual, but actually they have great meaning. And therefore, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu also has said that following the Vaishnava etiquettes is the actual ornament for a Vaishnava. And Mahaprabhu has given great stress on these etiquettes. And we see that Mahaprabhu himself, and what to speak of Mahaprabhu, of course, he's the Supreme Lord, even Krishna himself, he also follows all these etiquettes so meticulously, not only just to set an example, but then even as a person, he would follow all of them. Why? Because they're so very important. Okay, fine. And here, Maharaj Prithu.
Prabhuji, I did not understand this physiological commentary when, I mean, Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur's commentary. Can you explain, please?
So see, as I understand, so basically saying that, so when the elders approach the life heirs, move upward, out of the body. So by standing up in respect, the life heirs return to the body. So that means, my understanding is there's some balance in the life heirs by the appropriate etiquette. So if one does not follow the etiquette, then there's likely to be an imbalance in the life heirs. And an imbalance in the life heirs will cause disease. So that's my understanding. Somebody else want to say something on this? Okay, let's go ahead. Text 4. When the great sages accepted their reception according to the instructions of the Shastras and finally took their seats offered by the king, influenced by the glories of the sages, immediately bowed down. Thus he worshipped the 4 Kumaras. So, yes, anyway, it reminds me of one thing. Prabhupada is quoting here Sakshat Daritvena Samasta Shastre, and Prabhupada is saying that the spiritual master, the Parampara Acharya, should be respected exactly like the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So this means that Prithu Maharaj also strictly followed the injunctions of the Shastra in receiving a spiritual master or Acharya of the transcendental disciplic succession. Whenever an Acharya is seen, one should immediately bow down before him. Prithu Maharaj did this properly. Therefore, the words used here are Prashrayanata Kandara. Out of humility, he bowed down before the Kumaras. So Srila Prabhupada, in one lecture, Srila Prabhupada says, my disciples, every time they see me, they bow down. Even if it is hundreds of times in a day, every time they bow down. So Prabhupada is speaking about the following of etiquettes showing respect. And so that was how Prabhupada, he wanted this, of course, not for himself, but then that is the etiquette, because then one is actually offering respects to the Supreme Lord. He is accepting as a representative. And of course, we definitely hear Shrutigiti Prabhu says how whenever he would offer chapatis to Srila Prabhupada, he would bring hot chapati, one hot chapati, he would enter the room, offer obeisances, then put the chapati on the plate, again offer obeisances, go back to the kitchen, again next chapati. So that was every time, whenever he would enter the room, he would offer obeisances. Shrutigiti Prabhu says Prabhupada never objected. He never said, no need, it's all right. No. Prabhupada accepted it because he was showing the proper etiquette, proper respect. And Shrutigiti Prabhu tells 2 other pastimes in this regard. He says that there was one devotee, you can see it in Veda Base also sometimes when the recitation of the verse and translation, there's one Nitai Das. So there was this devotee who was serving as Srila Prabhupada's secretary for some time. And so on one occasion, as we know, the secretary would come during Srila Prabhupada's massage and he would dictate the mail, the letters and Prabhupada would reply to them as the massage was going on. And the secretary would take notes and then he would type them and send the letters back. So this Prabhu was, that day somehow he was coming one by one with one letter. So he came with one letter, offered obeisances, then he would read it out, take the dictation. And he went out, got the next letter. So that was going on a few times. And then Prabhupada, he remarked, Srila Prabhupada said, what is this hatchet obeisances? Hatchet means an axe. So an axe, also seems to be offering obeisances, but obviously it is mechanical. So Shuddhagati Prabhu says that somehow Srila Prabhupada detected that this devotee, he is offering obeisances mechanically without the actual feeling of respect. And then he says that sure enough, after a few days, this devotee left. So, but Srila Prabhupada detected that he was actually offering obeisances mechanically. And another pastime which Shuddhagati Prabhu says is that once in Juhu, so Srila Prabhupada he came from his apartment to go for his morning walk. All the devotees were waiting for Srila Prabhupada. As soon as Srila Prabhupada came, then all the devotees immediately offered obeisances. But there was one new devotee who didn't offer obeisances. He continued to stand. And Srila Prabhupada looked at him and said, this is the beginning of his fall down. So that's how Srila Prabhupada was very particular about the following of etiquettes, not only just externally, but with the right attitude. And that is what Ritu Maharaj is showing us. Text 5. After this, the king took the water which had washed the lotus feet of the Kumara, sprinkled it over his hair. By such respectful actions, the king as an exemplary personality showed how to receive a spiritually advanced personality. So he's showing by his example. Text 6. The four great sages were elder to Lord Shiva, and when they were seated on the golden throne, they appeared just like fire blazing on an altar. Maharaj Prithu, out of his great gentleness and respect for them, began to speak with great restraint as follows. So now Prithu Maharaj is speaking to them. So somebody can read the translations of these verses from 7 to 16.
King Prithu spoke. My dear great sages, auspiciousness personified, it is very difficult for even the mystic yogis to see you. Indeed, you are very rarely seen. I do not know what kind of pious activities I performed for you to grace me by appearing before me without difficulty. Any person upon whom the Brahmanas and the Vaishnavas are pleased can achieve anything which is very rare to obtain in this world as well as after death. Not only that, but one also receives the favor of the auspicious Lord Shiva and Lord Vishnu, who accompany the Brahmanas and the Vaishnavas. Prithu Maharaj continued, although you are traveling in all planetary systems, people cannot know you, just as they cannot know the super soul, although he is within everyone's heart as the witness of everything. Even Lord Brahma and Lord Shiva cannot understand the super soul. A person who is not very rich and is attached to a family life becomes highly glorified when saintly persons are present in his home. The master and the servants who are engaged in offering the exalted visitors water, a sitting place, and paraphernalia for reception are glorified, and the home itself is also glorified. On the contrary, even though full of all opulences and material prosperity, and a householder's house where the devotees of the Lord are never allowed to come in, and where there is no water for washing their feet, is to be considered a tree in which all venomous serpents live. Maharaj Prithu offered his welcome to the four Kumaras, addressing them as the best of the Brahmanas. He welcomed them, saying, from the beginning of your birth, you strictly observed the vows of celibacy, and although you are experienced in the path of liberation, you are keeping yourselves just like a small children. Prithu Maharaj inquired from the sages about persons entangled in this dangerous material existence because of their previous actions. Could such persons, whose only aim is sense gratification, be blessed with any good fortune? Prithu Maharaj continued, my dear sirs, there is no need to ask about your good and bad fortune because you are always absorbed in spiritual bliss. The mental concoction of the auspicious and inauspicious does not exist in you. I am completely assured that personalities like you are the only friends for persons who are blazing in the fire of material existence. I therefore ask you, how in this material world we can very soon achieve the ultimate goal of life. The Supreme Personality of a Godhead is always anxious to elevate the living entities who are his parts and parcels, and for their special benefit, the Lord travels all over the world in the form of self-realized persons like you.
Okay, so in this way, we find Prithu Maharaj, he is, first of all, he is glorifying the four Kumaras, and is calling them auspiciousness personified. Mangalam Mangalayana in text 7 is glorifying them, and he is considering himself greatly fortunate. And he's saying that Dur Darshanam. So actually, your darshan is so rare. Just like even Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, 11th chapter, Sudur Darsham. Having darshan of the Supreme Lord is extremely rare. So similarly, having darshan of such great Vaishnavas is also extremely rare. And then he's saying that I don't know what pious activities I performed. Prabhupada says, actually saying out of humility. There's no question of not having pious credits. Prithu Maharaj is full of pious credits, but out of humility he's saying that. And then he's expressing what will be the result of the having darshan of such Brahmanas and Vaishnavas, and if they're pleased, then one receives the favor of even the demigods like Lord Shiva and Vishnu, because if the Lord is pleased, then everyone else is also pleased. And so he's basically describing how it is so rare. He says it is as rare as knowing the super soul. Just like knowing the super soul is so rare, but similarly, knowing such great personalities is so rare. So Prabhupada, he describes how understanding a Vaishnav, recognizing a Vaishnav is very difficult, very rare. And he's given the examples of how even Indra, Brahma, they also could not understand the Supreme Lord. How Chandrasekhar Acharya could not recognize Sanatan Goswami. So in this way, understanding and recognizing a Vaishnav with the material eyes is difficult. So Prabhupada says one has to purify senses, engage in the service of the Lord. Then gradually one can realize who's the Supreme Personality of Godhead and who's the Vaishnav. So in the Bhagavad Gita 7:25, the Lord is saying, Naham Prakasha Sarvasya Yogamaya Samavrita. So the Lord keeps himself covered by his internal potency. So very difficult to recognize. So even so many people saw the Supreme Lord when he was performing Leela here. Duryodhan saw, Shishupal saw, Kalia saw, Poundrak saw. So many people saw with their own eyes, but they could not recognize. Why? They were not purified to recognize. And then he's speaking about the etiquettes of guest reception. So he says that even if somebody is not rich and is attached to family life, Prabhupada says materially if a man is not very rich, he's not glorious, and spiritually if a man is too attached to family life, he's also not glorious. But saintly persons are quite ready to visit the house of poor man or a man who is attached to material family life. When this happens, the owner of the house and his servants are glorified because they offer water for washing the feet of saintly and sitting place on the things to receive him. So a person becomes glorified, even though he may materially, spiritually not very qualified, but if he receives great saintly persons, then he becomes glorified. And then in the purport, Prabhupada is describing that what are the etiquettes in receiving guests. If somebody suddenly comes, Atiti, so then he can offer food. If he does not have food, then at least he should offer a glass of water. If not that, then at least a place to sit. If not that, then at least some kind words. And if not that, then cry tears and lament for not being able to satisfy the guest. And so if one is not able to satisfy the guest, then the next verse describes it's like a tree in which there are venomous serpents. Prabhupada is describing all that. And then finally, Maharaj Prithu is asking question. He's asking a question. So in the 13th verse, Kachanna Kushalamna tha Indriyartha Vedinam Vyavasana Vapa Etasmin Patitanam Swakarmabhi. So he's saying that we have become patit. How we have become patit? Swakarmabhi. By our own activity, we have become patit. So then what is the hope for, what is the kushalam? How can such patit people like us, of course, again, out of humility, is asking, how can patit people like us have any good fortune? Prabhupada writes in the book, Maharaj Prithu did not ask the Kumaras about their good fortune, for the Kumaras are always auspicious by the end of their life in celibacy. That, of course, that is being mentioned in the next verse. So, and then later he says, the question was asked by Prithu Maharaj for his own sake, since he was in the position of a grihastha and in charge of royal authority. And of course, he's asking that question for the benefit of everyone else. And the next verse, he says that there is no auspicious and inauspicious for the four Kumaras because they are totally absorbed in the Supreme Lord on the transcendental position. So for them, there is nothing. And therefore, he does not waste time asking about Diyar Kushalam. He directly, immediately jumps to the question as to how people like us, we can get good fortune. And he's saying that you are representative of the Supreme Lord, traveling all over the world on behalf of the Supreme Lord. So kindly help us come out of the blazing fire of material existence. So in the 15th verse, he's asking, Kshema Enanjasa Bhavet. Kshema. Kshema means ultimate reality, ultimate benefits. How can, without delay, how can we achieve our ultimate benefit? So we are suffering. Tapasvinam. Interesting word, tapasvinam. Tapasvinam, and the word to word Prabhupada translates as suffering material pangs. And Prabhupada explains in the purport that the materialistic person can also be called tapasvi, which means someone who's always suffering from material pains. That is another kind of tapasya. So much tapasya in the material world, so much suffering. So he's asking, how can we come out of this suffering condition? So you are the actual friend of the suffering people. So therefore, kindly enlighten us. And then from the 18th verse, Sanat Kumar begins to give his valuable instructions. So we'll discuss that tomorrow. Thank you all very much for your kind attention for the long class. Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Grandhara Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Samved Gaur Bhakta Vrinda ki jai. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram